Good morning. It is 7 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, a very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
The government announces the Great British Summer Savings Scheme, but will it make a difference to the cost of living crisis?
Ofcom criticises YouTube and TikTok for not doing enough to keep children safe online.
The kitchen counter material, which has caused over 500 cases of silicosis. We report from its epicentre in California.
Also today, the big week of football continues. A goal that's deserving of a royal seal of approval as Aston Villa win the Europa League in style, their first trophy this century. A very good morning to you. Welcome to the programme. We're going to start by talking about the cost of living. It's a persistent problem, of course, made worse by the war in the Middle East. Well, yesterday it became clear that ministers have been pressing supermarkets to cut costs for shoppers. Today, the government's announcing a raft of measures to try and make it a bit easier to get by.
Well, the government are calling it the Great British Summer Savings Scheme. So let's have a look at some of the details of what they're planning. First up is a cut to import tariffs on 100 food products, so things like chocolate, biscuits, dried fruit. Kids aged between 5 and 15 will be able to travel for free on buses throughout August. But also important to note what isn't in there, because there's no immediate help to lower energy bills.
Our political correspondent Lucy McDade is here. So, Lucy, today we get the sort of full details laid out on exactly what's coming, but at this point kind of get quite a good steer. Most importantly, that help is more likely to be means-tested this time around compared to what it was 4 years ago with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Yeah.
This is a funny one, really, because in a sense we've got the government making some announcements today. Obviously, yesterday they said about fuel duty. They're going to keep the freeze that's on there so it won't go up from September. They're going to keep that at least until the end of the year. The measures today, free bus travel, bits around reducing tariffs on food. But what you still don't have is the government able to make any big financial decision that will help people with their energy bills come the winter, when we know that kind of lurking in the wings, if you like, is this big shock that we're all going to have when, because of the war in the Middle East, energy bills are going to go up. What the government did do, and what we'll hear from Rachel Reeves today, is obviously energy bills came down by just over £100 because they made that change to the price cap. That was kind of reflected in the inflation figures we had yesterday. So it's a difficult one for the government because they want this week to really say that their priority is bringing down the cost of living. Rachel Reeves will today say, my economic plan is the right one. Look, it's working. Look at inflation coming down. But they are still waiting for the worst that's still to come. And I think they are trying to work out what their plan is. Like you're saying, Wilf, it's not going to be this big universal package of support. And I think they'll remind us of that today.
Yeah, interesting, the kind of subtext there that her plan is the right one, as in don't change the team at the kind of driving wheel,
so, yeah, I wanted to bring that up, actually, so thank you, because Starmer has written in the Times late last night for today. Rachel Reeves said something very similar today. The subtext to all of this, look, the cost of living is the big issue. It's really important, isn't it? But there is this leadership drama going on behind the scenes. And Keir Starmer's article today is really, if you read between the lines, it's them trying to say, him and Rachel Reeves saying, do not make any big changes because it's going to impact you and the money that you feel in your pockets. You know, keep us in office, basically, because we have a plan and we think it's working.
Rachel Reeves getting a lot of coverage yesterday as well for being heckled.
Yeah, so she was at a petrol station, I think, announcing that extending the freeze on fuel duty. Should we just have a look at it?
Yeah.
I love our country. I love our country. I love our country. And one of the things about our country is good manners. Not very British. Right. Very good.
Great.
Put that on the telly.
We have. I thought it was very endearing, personally.
Yeah, and I also think, so politicians, you know, we talk every day about what they're announcing. You know, the type of thing that cuts through is this type of clip. OK, so this has probably got more coverage than anything else that's happened in politics so far this week, and hence we are now talking about the kind of extension to the freeze on fuel duty, for example. But people love it when politicians show a little bit more of themselves. And also, if you want my opinion, he was being very rude, and good for her for coming back. And it's a little window into, you know, some of the things that politicians come up against when they do leave Westminster.
I agree. And we praised Kemi Badenoch when she took on Heckler, and I think, you know, we can do the same for Rachel Reeves. I think that absolutely fair enough. You know, if someone is shouting at you, then it is more than fair enough to shout back.
I also think there's quite an interesting lesson here, just in general, to everyone, which is if that person, but it was quite hard to hear all we're saying, apart from the words we had to bleep out, which were the loudest, probably had some legitimate points to make.
Yeah.
And had they done it in a more polite, warm way and said, look, I'm really struggling here and X, Y and Z, then they might have won the argument as well. So it's just quite interesting, I thought.
It is interesting. You're right that actually, you know, that person is reflecting a sentiment that people are feeling right across the country. We've seen it, not least in like local election results, that people are angry, frustrated with the Labour government. But I feel, just watching it as a human being, it just felt a bit aggressive. And you know, she dealt with that really very well, actually. And look, we're all talking about it.
Yeah. I think just to come back to where we started as well, there's obviously, you know, blame the crisis on Donald Trump, on the Middle East war. It's not our war. I think that is clearly very legitimate and also probably quite a good communication, political strategy. The thing I think is going to be interesting in the months ahead is saying our plan is working. You know, you've had 1 month of better than expected inflation data, but nobody's feeling it in their pockets. It's still higher than target. And most importantly, it is going to go up again much more significantly, both next month, but most importantly, kind of quite persistently all year, because, you know, the energy price cap has this effect of sort of like smoothing out but delaying the increase. So realistically now, we're going to have probably 6 months, probably the rest of this year, consistent increases in inflation that higher than expected. And that doesn't even go to say 2 days earlier we had employment data, and that was terrible. So it's a bit of an odd communications plan to say, look, my plan is working, because I don't think anyone looks at it and says, I believe it.
You know, let's be honest, I don't want to criticise the government for making a set of positive announcements, because they are. But is free bus travel going to really change the dial in terms of how people are feeling when it comes to paying off their bills every month, booking their summer holiday that they've been waiting all year for? That's exactly right, that there is more serious concerns coming, and the government knows it's going to have to tackle that.
Lucy, thanks very much. Well, sticking with the cost of living, because one thing that the government has done to try and alleviate it is proving pretty controversial. We'll come to that later, but before we do, Defence Secretary John Healey has accused Russia of dangerous and unacceptable behaviour after a confrontation over the Black Sea between Russian pilots and the RAF.
The Ministry of Defence says that one Russian Su-27 aircraft as close as 6 metres to an unarmed British biplane, which is close enough to trigger its emergency systems.
So we got this statement following the call. A Downing Street spokesperson said the Prime Minister reaffirmed the... I believe, actually, this is a separate... So there's two stories that we're covering today about Russia. The first is that spy plane. This statement is on the sanctions from Russia. I think we should come back off it and just explain the story first. So this is about the decision by the UK government to try and alleviate the cost of living pressures to effectively allow jet fuel, diesel made from Russian crude oil, perhaps refined in countries like India, to enter the UK. Very, very controversial. And Keir Starmer spoke to President Zelensky about it. This was the statement that Downing Street put out after that call. The spokesperson said, the Prime Minister reaffirmed the UK's steadfast support for Ukraine and sounded out our ongoing commitment to do everything possible to debilitate and degrade Putin's war machine. He outlined how the UK was ramping up measures to crack down on Russia's economy, including through the new package of sanctions announced today, and that as a result of the UK's actions to date, there will be less Russian oil on the market, with Russia weaker as a result.
Of course, we want to have a little bit look in more detail at that, and Ed Conway has been doing that for us. Here's his take.
Now, has Britain reversed some of its sanctions on Russia? It's a slightly complex story, but let me just kind of take you through some of it. And I guess, you know, the overarching kind of background to this is that we are really dependent in this country on imported jet fuel from overseas. This is just showing you, around the world, who are the biggest importers of jet fuel, just bar none. And you can see the UK is right at the top. We need a lot of jet fuel into this country. We've got lots of airports. We don't make much of the stuff domestically. So we've got to import it. And historically, you know, a lot of that jet fuel came from the Middle East. Historically, some of it came from Russia. Then, of course, you had the invasion of Ukraine. And when the invasion of Ukraine happened, sanctions were imposed on Russia, and all of a sudden, we weren't able to import jet fuel. This is just showing you levels of jet fuel imports. But look what happened at the same time with our jet fuel imports from India. So this is from India. Jet fuel imports at the time, kind of 2022, when all those sanctions on Russian imports went into place, jet fuel imports from India went up quite a bit. And here's the interesting thing. If you look at a lot of that jet fuel that we're importing from India, a lot of it has come originally from Russia. That's the critical thing. And we've been talking about this for quite some time. And actually, just last year, in October, the government said, look, we're ramping up sanctions. We're ramping up sanctions against Russia. And among the things they are going to tackle, or they said they were going to tackle at that point, they said that they were going to ban imports of oil products refined in third countries from Russian-origin crude oil. In other words, that's exactly the kind of thing that you see with some Indian crude imports and jet fuel imports. So they said back in October they were going to do that. Roll on to where we are today, and obviously there's a lot of focus back on this again. So I showed you the fact that we're really dependent on imports of jet fuel. Well, on top of that, we don't have much in the way of stocks of jet fuel. And then you have what's happening in Hormuz. They have big question marks about whether we're going to be able to get any jet fuel at all. And all of a sudden, the government is kind of worried. And they're worried because of that. They're worried because we're seeing cancellations of flights at many airports around the country, partly because of jet fuel being short. And so that's what brings us on to today. Now, you've got those new sanctions that they said were going to go into place. They said it was going to affect all of those products coming from other countries, which may have started as Russian oil. But now, all of a sudden, we had this announcement. There's kind of complex, the details of it. But basically, if we roll through this, what you see is it says that some of the Russia regulations do not apply to what's mentioned in this licence. And what's mentioned in this licence, I'm going to scroll down a bit so you can see, it is jet fuel and diesel. In other words, the sanctions don't apply to that stuff. And that's, you know, significant, because if you look at the picture of just how much money the Kremlin was making from various different bits of kind of crude oil revenues, it was going down up until recently. In fact, it was the lowest. In February, it was the lowest, their revenues from oil and gas, the lowest in 6 years. Well, now, that's oil prices, and you can see the higher oil prices are, the higher the revenues are. Oil prices have gone up, and also the Kremlin's revenues have gone up. In other words, partly as a result of higher oil prices, you can see those revenues are at the highest in 2 years. So Russia is doing better, and thanks to this change in the UK's sanctions regulation, we are, I'm afraid, going to continue to be a part of that.
Fascinating analysis, kind of just putting the facts behind the accusations that everyone was sort of throwing at the government yesterday.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the government has to say about it in 5 minutes or so as well.
Now, Ofcom says it is still concerned that TikTok and YouTube are not safe enough for children and have not made changes to improve online safety. So
Meta, Snapchat and Roblox have agreed to introduce stronger anti-grooming measures. So this is, after a slap on the wrist, if you like, a call from the regulator.
Sadia's here with more on this. So what is the sort of differentiation that Ofcom is making here between those different platforms?
So one of the things that the government is looking at in this discussion about whether or not to ban social media for under 16s is what the tech companies themselves are doing. And we know, of course, last year the Online Safety Act came into place, and the Ofcom, which is the media regulator, which regulates all of this, has looked at data from before that law change and after to figure out if tech companies are doing enough. And they say that they're failing in doing anything. And all of this while there are plain evidence that there is harm being caused. This data that they've done that is part of this children's online safety tracker that they have. And some of the things that they've found in this is that there's very little change. So in terms of the number of children who are aged between 11 and 17 who say that they've experienced harmful content online, that number has barely changed since the new law came into place. The number of children who say their own personal feeds remain sort of the most likely place through which they're exposed to harmful content, that number has also not changed very much. And 9 in 10 children who are aged between 8 and 12 are using platforms that have an age restriction of 13. So a real big problem there in terms of what's happening. And they say that the tech companies keep saying to them, oh, everything that we've done is safe and we have all the safety measures in place. Ofcom had also given YouTube and TikTok in particular until the end of April to come back and set out what it's done. And they say neither of those platforms have come back and done that. So this is what the platforms themselves have said. A Meta spokesperson said that they've invested in tools and policies to ensure that teens have a safe and positive online experience. TikTok says that it's very disappointing that Ofcom has failed to acknowledge their long-standing but also their newer safety features. And a YouTube spokesperson said the platform provides industry-leading and age-appropriate experiences for young people. So I think the standoff between the social media companies, the tech firms, and the regulator is going to continue.
Sally, Christoph, thank you.
Now, a few weeks ago, we told you about the potentially deadly impact of working with engineered stone, so that's stuff like quartz kitchen worktops. And later today, lawmakers in California will vote on whether to ban it, potentially becoming the first US state to outlaw its use.
In what doctors are calling an epidemic, the state has recorded over 560 cases of silicosis. It's an incurable lung condition linked to the quartz workshops. Katie Barfield reports for us from Los Angeles.
This room is now Jose's world, needing oxygen 24/7. He can't work, can't drive, can't even play with his grandchildren.
The disease is aggressive, it's unpredictable. Sometimes I don't want to see anyone, I don't want to speak to anyone. And it's all because of this.
He's one of hundreds of California workers who contracted silicosis, a deadly lung disease from inhaling dust while cutting quartz worktops.
I have 4 children, 14 grandchildren. I've overheard conversations between them and my wife where they ask her what she's going to do when she's alone. I hold on to my faith. I ask God for more time to live.
You might have quartz worktops like these in your own kitchen.
Recently, I reported on the beginning of a silicosis crisis in the UK.
I'm absolutely sure there are people who have silicosis who are unaware that they have it walking around the UK at the moment.
In California, it has already become an epidemic. The US state has seen more than 560 diagnoses and 31 deaths from silicosis in tradesmen working with engineered stone, with 98% of all cases being Latino workers. This is Anna's husband, Victor, a countertop worker, before the silicosis took hold. 5 years ago, she lost him to the disease.
I pray here, and when I am sad, I come and speak to him. It's been 5 years, but I wish that he was still here. I miss him so much. Before he passed away, his health was terrible. At night, I was afraid that he wouldn't wake up the next morning. He was always wearing his mask, but it doesn't mean the mask could protect him. He still got the disease.
And how do you feel about this product, quartz engineered stone, still being sold, still being used, you know, around the world?
I feel bad because this is going to happen to other families. And there are families with children, and they will be orphans without a father.
There has been a growing campaign in California for a ban on the use of engineered stone, the same move that Australia made 2 years ago. California's Occupational Health Board has been debating whether to start that process.
Hi, James. Nice to meet you. I'm Katie. How are you doing?
James Nevin's law firm, Brayton Purcell, is representing hundreds of silicosis patients.
Well, we started approximately 3 years ago with 20 cases. As of today, we're up to 750 clients. I mean, this is just off the charts epidemic. When it comes to high content crystal and silica artificial stone, wet methods, ventilation, mass do not work.
What would you say to the UK about what we could maybe expect coming down the line?
The silicosis that is diagnosed is the tip of the iceberg, because most of it is not getting diagnosed. The problem is so much worse than people realize. People just aren't looking.
The industry body that would meet with us is called the International Surface Fabricators Association. They represent both the manufacturers who make engineered stone
and the fabricators who cut it.
I trust our industry and the ones that are doing it properly, and I trust that that the information that they're saying that it can be done safely, it is done safely. I do trust that.
But why even bother working with a product that has been proven to have a risk of silicosis when there are, like you say, zero silica alternatives available? Why even do that?
Yeah, you're trying to pigeon me into an answer. I'm not going to give you one. So, but good
why
try.
not?
Because why not? Because that's not again, that is not what we're not representing the product. We're talking about licensing on behalf of the fabrication community. And, you know, we are product neutral.
Behind the debate over the safety of engineered stone are more and more people whose lives are being destroyed. They want the rest of the world to listen to them before it's too late. Katie Barnfield, Sky News, Los Angeles.
Look, it's such a powerful report by Katie. We are interested to get your views on this one. Maybe you've got a quartz kitchen worktop. Maybe you know someone affected by this. Get in contact. You can email us at mornings@sky.uk. That's mornings@sky.uk. Right, let's return to our main story, shall we? And the measures the government is introducing to try and alleviate some of those cost of living pressures over the summer of savings, we're hearing. The Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Lucy Rigby, is here. Good to have you on the programme. So just talk us through the announcements you're making to try and help support people with the cost of living.
So the Chancellor's going to be talking more about this in the Chamber later on today. But the key thing that I want to talk about this morning is about the free unlimited bus travel for children between 5 and 15 right across England. So what we're trying to do, you referred to it as the summer of savings, what we're trying to do, we recognise that families have got stretched budgets at the moment. You're a mum like me, you sort of think ahead to the summer holidays. It's sort of, you know, it's wonderful to have the children off school, but equally you're thinking, OK, so is it going to be clubs or what are the things that we're going to do together? And so, as I said, because we know that people are struggling with the cost of living at the moment, we're trying to take off the pressure just that little bit so you can, with that free bus travel for children, can go and see relatives, take their children to the cinema or the museum, whatever it is, but just try and ease the pressure a little bit. It's part of a package of things the Chancellor's going to be talking more about in the Chamber. It comes on the back of what the Prime Minister announced yesterday on fuel duty. There are further measures there as well, specifically on red diesel and HGV vehicle excise duty as well. And look, as I said, you know, we've been talking about the cost of living for sometimes we recognise that it's the key thing that's affecting people at the moment, and we're trying to bring those costs down.
Is there a bit, because obviously the inflation data most recently was actually pretty good, but is this a reflection and an acknowledgement that things are going to get harder this year?
Look, because of the decisions that the Chancellor has made, you're right. So the inflation data was heading in the right direction. The growth figures were also, we saw that earlier this week, heading in the right direction. We've seen interest rates cut 6 times, really important, particularly
the questions about the rest of the year
for mortgages. Yeah, so we recognise that despite, you know, then those things have happened because of the good, frankly, and fiscally responsible way that we've been managing the economy. We recognise that particularly because of what's going on internationally, there is concern out there at the moment, and that goes on top of, as I said, people are like family budgets
things
are
are going to get harder, though, aren't they? That's the question, right? And I'm not
recognise
blaming anyone for it or saying this is you, but you know, it's going to be a tough year.
Clearly, because of what's happening internationally, and particularly the crisis in the Middle East, we know that there are people are concerned, and you know we've seen the impact of that coming through. What the Chancellor has been clear about, though, Sophie, is that she will take action where we can do that, but we're going to do that in a responsible way.
We've got so the one thing that the announcement doesn't mention is help with energy costs. Is it fair to say that the days of energy help, universal energy help that isn't means tested are over because we can't afford it?
The Chancellor was clear that she wants to monitor the situation and then she's going to intervene in a targeted way if the circumstances
So not universal
demand
then, that's means tested is what
So
you're saying.
what's happened, as you know, the energy price cap has come down, so it's good. The energy bills came down, so between April and June, and that's really, really important because of some of the cost of living pressures that we've been talking about. But the Chancellor said that the way that the last government dealt with this, intervened in an untargeted way, which is hugely costly for the taxpayer. The Chancellor's been clear that she's not going to rush to action. She's not going to rush to any sort of universal action in that way. What she is doing is monitoring the situation internationally, monitoring the situation when it comes to our economy and the likely impact on energy bills.
To help with the cost of living, the government's now going to allow diesel and jet fuel from Russian crude oil to enter the UK if it's refined in other countries, so kind of predominantly India. And I just wanted to show you some research that our economics and data editor, Ed Conway's been doing on this to look at how Russia's effectively been profiting from the rise in oil prices. So just to look at the first here. So this shows, you can see the blue lines there. This is Russian oil revenues, and you can see that they were actually falling, right? So February were the lowest for 6 years. But then if you look at what happened last month, which I think we can show now, it spiked straight up, right? So as soon as oil prices go up, Russia benefits, Putin's war machine benefits. Are we comfortable that we are now indirectly helping that spike?
So we need to be really, really clear about this, right? There's a package of sanctions that was announced that makes life much tougher for Putin. It makes his war effort harder because this stuff goes to drones and supply of missiles and all the rest of it. So overall, the package of sanctions since this announcement is much tougher. Now, as a whole, when you know we've got a world-leading sanctions regime in this country, we've sanctioned more than 3,300 Russian individuals, entities, businesses. Now, what you're referring to, Sophie, if I'm right, are these two specific licences that we've said are going to be short-term, so we're talking about months here, and they're going to be reviewed really regularly. The reason that you have licences as part of a sanctions regime, and I know this, I used to do the financial sanctions, was in my old role as economic secretary, that licences are a really key part of the sanctions regime, such that you can sort of phase in.
Yeah, I get it. You're saying it's short term. You can say that you can take it away again, right? That's the argument you're making. But you've decided
aim to. That's really important.
You have decided to allow this to happen. So you have made that decision, right? Last October, you said you're going to ban jet fuel made from Russian crude oil. You're not doing that. Even if you say you're going to change it,
so because of these targeted licences, Sophie, we are managing the impact.
There's a lot of words here,
but
there's a lot of words here,
but the words are really important because I'm trying to explain what we're doing. Because this is somehow being made out as we were going soft on Putin. That could not be further from the truth. This package of sanctions is really, really tough.
What is happening, though? What is happening is that this government is now going to allow diesel and jet fuel from Russian crude oil to enter the UK.
As I said, we're managing the impact on our economy. And now, if you look at what the EU are doing, so the EU have said they'll have a full ban by the end of 2026.
I'm talking about the specific
managing the phasing in the same way. But they're managing it in the same way that we are. So it's a phase-in because we're thinking about the impact on our economy. So the EU have said full ban by the end of the year, and they're going to phase it in over the course of 2026. So in the same way that we're saying new sanctions package that makes life much tougher for Russia. And as I said, that comes on the back of a whole host of things because our support for Ukraine, as you know, is entirely steadfast. We do have these licences. They're going to be reviewed really regularly. Our aim will be to end them as soon as we possibly can. But we're doing that so we can manage the impact on the economy.
I just have two other questions I was keen to ask you before I know you have to go. The first is a story we're running today about a man called Ben Stimson. So he's a British national, but he's fighting for Russia.
Right.
So I guess my question is he a traitor? And given the fact that he also has a Russian passport, by the way, should he be stripped of his citizenship?
Sophie, so forgive me, I don't have the details of his individual case. Clearly, matters of citizenship are for the Home Office. I'm sure they'll give you a statement on this later today. There are, as you know, particular rules around statelessness and stripping people of their citizenship, but clearly, you know, this guy's a pretty reprehensible individual if he's over fighting for Putin.
And then just finally, I wanted to get your response to Rachel Reeves dealing with a heckler. So she was at a petrol station, right? And this guy came, was shouting at her. Probably, actually, you know, I'm sure he has legitimate concerns. Maybe he's finding his cost of living pretty difficult. He swore at her, and she came back by saying that it was, well, I'm British.
I think anyone that knows Rachel knows that she's pretty robust and she'll give as good as she gets. So I think I'm right in saying she shouted right back. But the key thing, as indeed she made reference to at the time, is that what we're doing on fuel duty, right? And maybe the guy who shouted at her wasn't aware of the good stuff that we're doing on fuel duty. Maybe he can drive past again and he'd be a bit more polite.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Lucy Rigby speaking to you as there. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the outbreak of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We'll be talking with Dr. Ekwaro Obuka about that outbreak.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking,
thank you so much,
trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10.
Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget.
Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
The World Health Organization's warning of an outbreak of Ebola in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda, which is believed to have infected around 600 people and could last for at least a further few months.
So today the UK is announcing it's going to provide up to £20 million to help contain the Ebola outbreak. And that money is then going to go to support frontline health workers who, of course, are at risk of infection, improve infection control and also disease surveillance, so trying to work out how widespread it is.
Joining us now is Dr. Ekwaro Obuka, former president of the Ugandan Medical Association. Thank you so much for joining us. Is Uganda seeing a lot of cases, or is it mainly currently in the Democratic Republic of the Congo?
Yes, thank you very much. The epidemic is centered around the DRC, with which we share a very long border of 700 kilometers, which is porous. We have twice a week flight from Eastern Congo to the Entebbe International Airport. And because of that, we have designated ourselves as very high risk, including rather specifically 12 districts in the eastern border with the DRC. And of course, the hazard being Ebola, very, very contagious and highly fatal. That's why we are saying that Uganda is at very high risk. However, we must put this into perspective that we have only 2 cases which are imported from the DRC. They came to seek care in Kampala here. 1 died and was repatriated to DRC. 1 is still undergoing care. Over 100 contracts are under surveillance. And again, we must remember that in all of this, we still have the ongoing bigger problems like malaria, which kill over 15,000 in Uganda alone. But Ebola, because of the nature of the disease, brings about fear, brings about drama, limits our trade and travel. And that's why we say it is very high risk, and we consider it a very big problem.
Yeah, as you say, it's the sort of fatality of it, isn't it? The deadliness of it that is so worrying. How difficult is it to really get a handle on how many people have Ebola?
In Uganda, it's not difficult. We have the capacity. The health system is strong. We have had 8 outbreaks before. We have mounted very, very strong responses. In 2019, there was a similar situation of 4 spillages from DRC. Of course, we spent a bit of money, $25 million. We also put up a very good response in a very short time, in less than 4 months, I believe, and we conquered it. Unfortunately, the system in DRC is weaker. They took 6 weeks to detect the first case, suggesting that perhaps the health system wasn't robust, the resources were not available, given the dwindling of international aid, especially from the US government and its other development partners. But I'm hearing that the WHO is mobilizing resources to ensure that an effective response is mounted in the DRC. We must understand that an effective response means detecting and confirming the virus within 7 days of the outbreak. They took 6 weeks, meaning they had a 5-week delay, showing that the health system was not as responsive in the DRC, even though they have had 17 outbreaks before.
So it's so interesting, to be honest, to hear the contrast between the DRC and Uganda, you know, as you kind of lay it out, and the impact that 6-week delay could have had because of the fragility of their healthcare system. You mentioned the aid cuts. What kind of impact could that have?
Sorry, come again?
You mentioned the aid cuts.
Of course, the aid cuts, this money, the way it used to work is that it was easily accessible. Like in our experience in Uganda, government has money, but government moves slowly. So what happened is that this money of the USAID, money from UK aid and so on, or WHO, was available to non-state actors whose systems are more efficient in terms of releasing money and deploying the rapid response teams to the field to investigate in time and then collect the samples, interview individuals, send the samples back to the, again, highly dependent, a central laboratory that is highly dependent on funding from the US government. This is called the Central Public Health Laboratory in Kampala, do the investigations quickly and return the results. So this money which was available and making work flexible and easy and efficient is no longer the case. Right now, of course, the US government has signed a direct agreement with the Ministry of Health, and the money is, I believe, centralized to the Ministry of Health. But in Uganda, I would like to say that I think the situation is under control. No other new cases detected, only suspects being investigated for up to, of course, 21 days of the incubation period, at which point they will be released.
Dr. Abuku, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Now, the government has delayed plans to tighten sanctions on Russian oil imports amid concerns over fuel supplies and prices. Well, under the proposals, diesel and jet fuel made originally from Russian crude could still enter the UK for a temporary period, provided the oil is refined in a separate country. Sir Keir Starmer insisted the changes would not weaken existing restrictions on Russia. Well, joining us is Tom Keating, the Director of Centre for Finance and Security at RUSI, who's also someone who is sanctioned by Russia, I think I'm right in saying.
Yes, for my sins I am.
So interesting to have you on to discuss this. Just talk us through, very good morning to you, by the way, talk us through your assessment of what was announced yesterday versus what wasn't quite announced yesterday.
I think the most important thing that was said yesterday was said by Chris Bryant, which was it was a communications train wreck by the government. As Ed Conway had on his package earlier on, in October last year, the government announced its intention to stop importing oil products that had been converted in third countries such as India. So it was an intention. That intention was meant to come to pass around about now, and they have basically delayed the intention as relates to diesel and jet fuel. So two things are true. The sanctions are stronger than they were before, but not as strong as they could have been.
And specifically allow us to import these jet fuel, diesel products that have originated from Russia in the first place.
Exactly. So, I mean, we are continuing to fund Russia's war in Ukraine. I mean, that's a black and white statement. But so are the Europeans. I mean, they import a huge amount of energy from Russia. So I think, the details are boring, but the details are that the government intended to do this, it's delayed it, and therefore, yeah, we could have been tougher today than we otherwise are.
I mean, it is obviously, as you state, a fact that Europe has continued throughout to buy more from Russia. I guess they, historically, before the war, also got a lot more from Russia than we did. I guess my question on this is it fair to say that we previously had a legitimate moral high horse to be on relative to the Europeans, relative even to the Americans, to say we really are doing all that we can to help Ukraine, and we might have lost some of that ability?
Yes, I mean, the UK's economic ties with Russia, as you say, lower than many European countries, like, say, Germany, for example. So the UK has relatively fewer levers to pull. And also, I think the optics in all of this as well. I don't underestimate how closely the Ukrainians watch what the UK is doing. The steadfast ally, we go back to the Boris Johnson era, standing shoulder to shoulder, continuing under this government. So it's just an embarrassment, frankly, for Downing Street. It was poorly communicated. I think people will move on. But the bottom line is, I think another critical thing in this is it just shows how vulnerable the UK is to decisions that are being made outside its control. The war in Iran is nothing to do with the UK. But the war in Iran is inflicting these kinds of decisions on the Prime Minister.
In terms of shortages coming forward or not, I mean, do you think this is an attempt to offset a government expectation that we're going to have outright shortages, or is it a cost of living measure and the worries in the months ahead aren't that severe?
I mean, I think arguably the government has been opportunistic. The day before, Scott Bessent, the US Treasury Secretary, extended the licence the United States is giving for Russian exports of oil. So coming the day after that, I wonder whether somebody thought a good day to announce something overshadowed what the Americans have announced and that they've been opportunistic. But at the end of the day, the UK, as the analysis shows, the UK is extremely vulnerable and we do not have energy security in this country. And so ultimately, the government has to make choices which are good for the UK, even if they are embarrassing on the global stage.
Assess for us the state of the Russian economy. Where was it in February before the Iran war started? Where is it now?
So they're obviously benefiting from the increase in oil price. But I think one thing that people overlook is what the Ukrainians call their kinetic sanctions. They're getting much, much better at targeting Russian energy infrastructure, refining infrastructure in the country. So that's an industry which is in deep trouble under attack from Ukrainian drones. So the Russian economy is not in a good place. It really is not in a good place. Read the morning news from Russia every morning. Even newspapers that support Vladimir Putin are pointing out to stress in the Russian economy. That's not good for the Kremlin.
Tom, thanks so much for joining us. Really interesting.
Thank you.
Your perspective. Time for a quick look at the weather.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Great news for the bank holiday, because it will become increasingly warm and sunny this weekend, with temperatures climbing to the high 20s. Parts of the Midlands and South East could even see values close to 30 degrees Celsius, but the northwest day will be largely cloudy at times. This morning, it's a bit of a dull start with some extensive cloud and outbreaks of rain across Scotland, northern England and North Wales. It will be drier in the south, with cloud breaking to give some brighter spells. Skies will continue to clear from the south, with warm sunshine extending northward. And temperatures in the sunnier spots will top 20 degrees Celsius. Many parts of the country will have a daytime high in the late teens.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Jubilation for Aston Villa fans. The club is crowned champions of the Europa League. Their first trophy this century. We'll look at the action next.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered.
From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul. Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too.
These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
I'm observing what you're doing.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's very positive.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to in the Rose Garden, in the East Wing?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist...
Hi, darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off and make a statement.
What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out! What more do you need?
So we're expecting a speech from Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, later today, announcing the government's cost of living package. She's going to be talking about a potential 5p cut on fuel duty that she announced yesterday. She's going to be talking about free bus fares for kids over the summer. What she's not going to be talking about, though, is universal support for energy bills.
No, and again, the great expectation now is that that will be means tested if it arrives later this year. Obviously, energy bills aren't expected to soar over the summer months, so they've got a bit of time here. And that will be in contrast to after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, where clearly it was universal. But given how tight finances are, quite understandable.
Let's discuss this in a bit more detail, shall we? The Chancellor, Samantha Stride, is here. Do you welcome some of those cost of living measures announced by the government?
Well, look, anything that helps to get prices down a little bit, of course, is to be welcomed in that sense. I think some of the approach, though, is completely flawed. This idea that you go in and start dictating to supermarkets what price they should be charging on certain goods.
Which they're not doing.
It's a very... Well, they're using various levers to try and do that, and their position seems to have been sort of moving around. But the reality is...
I think the position is they're not going to do that.
Well, they're going in and trying to use levers to suggest that that is the way that these supermarkets should behave. And I think the problem with that is both that it leads to potentially shortages on the shelves, and it puts a lot of cost pressure down the supply chain right the way up to the farm gate. And these are businesses that are already struggling under the tax policies of this government, for example.
The one thing they're not going to do is universal support on energy bills. The Conservatives obviously did that under Liz Truss. It cost, what, £40 billion? I mean, is that too expensive?
So I think where we are now in the economy at the moment is we are not in the kind of position we were when we went into the pandemic and had to end the Ukraine-Russia war and the inflation at that time. And we're not in a position, therefore, to be able to support, to provide sort of very large levels of support. And I think that is down to the fact that the government has mismanaged the economy since they've come into office. We haven't had the growth. We've had higher inflation than our competitors. high and rising unemployment, for example, and that's left us in a very fragile position. So I think the ability for the Chancellor to step in and act here is very limited, and that's why we're seeing some token things. I mean, at the end of the day, if you take tariffs off chocolate bars and peanuts and dried fruit, I'm sure that's useful to a degree, but it's not going to be able to provide the kind of support that's really going to help people, I think, as we go into this higher inflationary environment as a consequence of the Middle East war.
Part of the problem is, though, you know, the £40 billion that you did spend on the energy package, which I know was important to people, right, but it wasn't means-tested, that just got shoved on national debt, didn't it?
So at the time, if we wind back... if we wind back the clock, firstly, we got the economy into a position where just before the pandemic, for example, we were running a budget surplus. So we had the public finances under control.
You didn't pay for that £40 billion package through your incredible, management of the economy, because it just got shoved onto the debt.
No, at the end of the day, we had the capacity to do that at the time. If you look at the debt to GDP ratio, as the economists put it at that time, it allowed that headroom to do those kind of things. And we are not now in a position where the Chancellor is able to do that, and that is a situation of her own making. You look at the amount, you talk about borrowing. This government over this Parliament will borrow about £250 billion more than the plans that they inherited from the last government. So they are addicted to borrowing, to taxing businesses, and that's feeding through to a weak economy, which I'm afraid is not in a good position to lean into the challenges we now face.
Can I get your take on Rachel Reeves being heckled at this petrol station? Yes. The guy shouting at her, swearing at her, and she kind of turned around and said that she loves this country, and one of the things she loves about it is good manners. Are you on Team Rachel, or do you think it was a...
Well, I'm definitely not on Team Rachel, because I think she just made a complete mess of the economy, I'm afraid. And people are right to be angry and disappointed because they are suffering. But on the point... I'm coming to it. On the point of good manners, she is right that at the end of the day, I think our discourse around politics, and no matter how much strongly we feel about things, should be civil and polite. And I think that's part of, being British, and I think that's something that we should fight for. But in terms of people feeling deeply disappointed, in some cases rightfully angry about decisions that this government have taken, then I think many people are right to feel that.
Nigel Farage says that he would buy the guy a pint.
Well, that's Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage is about saying things that make you ask me that on this programme, so he gets to ventilate even more, his position and profile and so on. What this country needs, actually, is serious, deep thinking, about particularly around the economy, in terms of how we rewire our economy so it is stronger to meet the kind of challenges that we've been discussing in this interview. And that needs serious, grown-up politics, OK? It's not all jumping up and down saying, look at me, and trying to get the limelight. It is about doing the deep, hard thinking about the future of our country, and that is what the Conservative Party is doing.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Nance Ryan, speaking to us there.
Now, it was a historic night for Aston Villa, winning their first European title in 44 years and ending a 30-year trophy drought altogether.
Yeah, so they had a 3-0 win over the German club Freiburg in the Europa League final, and it sparked absolutely jubilant scenes across Birmingham and Istanbul, where fans travel for the game as well.
So here is some of the highlights. A remarkable achievement for the head coach, Unai Emery, by the way, who's now won the competition 5 times. That was the first goal coming. Superb volley from Yuri Tielemans.
If you thought that goal was good, take a look at this. Right on half-time, it was a curling effort by Emiliano Buendia, and it was a goal that had the Prince of Wales off his seat in the celebration too. William was only 1 when his side Villa last lifted a European trophy.
But still Prince. The third goal came from England forward Morgan Rogers, sealing the victory very convincingly. 23-year-old became the youngest player to score and assist in the Europa League final. Villa, 3-0 winners in Turkey.
And just look what it means. A pure elation back home in Birmingham for fans as they reacted to the opening goal. Imagine what they were like by the third one.
Yeah. Would have given them time for 1 or 2 more pints too. Lucky people. And the Prince of Wales obviously watching on. This was the moment they lift the cup. I love that he gets his phone out as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'd be able to phone up and say, can you send me the actual footage? Of course, a performance to remember for the club. Fantastic stuff. Unai Emery as well. Wow. 5 Europa Leagues. Do you know there's still trivia question. He's won 5 Europa Leagues with 3 different clubs, and Villa, V-I-L-L-A, appears in the name of all 3 clubs.
That is a great fact.
Isn't that unbelievable?
That's a great fact.
Villarreal, Sevilla, Aston Villa. How random is that?
That's excellent.
It's a good
Although
fact, thank
Sevilla's
you.
got an A, not an E. Oh no, they all got A's. I'm getting
No,
wrong.
Seville, the town does, but Sevilla...
Yeah, sorry. It's been a long week. I'm actually
It's not really
making any
Sevilla,
sense.
is it? We're being a bit
Sevilla.
British.
But anyway, the fact stands. It's a great fact.
It's a good fact. Congratulations, Unai Emery, former Arsenal manager, has proven himself unbelievably, resoundingly, after being unceremoniously let go. So congrats to him. Congrats to Villa fans. Enjoy.
There's been a development in this extraordinary story that is happening for Southampton because they've lost their appeal against expulsion from the Championship player final for spying on their semi-final opponents, Middlesbrough. They've lost the appeal. I mean, this is devastating, of course, for Southampton fans. The rules do state that you cannot do this. You cannot spy on another team's training within 72 hours of a match. So they did break the rules.
Yeah, I think, Sol Campbell said it absolutely right yesterday, didn't he, to us? Like, the rules are the rules. They've broken it. But how stupid and how unfair is it on both the fans, obviously, but the players too, because this was just a crazy decision by the leadership and whoever ultimately made the choice. As Sol Campbell said yesterday, you are spoilt for the videos you can watch of football these days. It's not like, when lower leagues weren't televised back in the day. Just if you want to assess how they play, watch endless hours of it.
And they're going to be punished for it, that failure by the management. They've lost their appeal, they've lost their chance of reaching the Premier League. They're probably going to lose an awful lot of their players as well because that's how it's done. The financial implications of it, tough time to be a Southampton fan.
That does it for this app. We'll be back with all the day's top news next.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News. People are directly protesting.
The whole neighbourhood has rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
With Sophie and Wilf, good morning from both of us.
The government announces the Great British Summer Savings Scheme, but what difference will it make to the cost of living crisis?
Ofcom criticises YouTube and TikTok for not doing enough to keep children safe online.
The kitchen counter material, which has caused over 500 cases of silicosis, we report from the epicenter in California.
We'll also be live in Istanbul as Aston Villa secure their first trophy this century.
A goal that's deserving of a royal seal of approval. Villa winning the Europa League in style, with the future king and Villa fan watching on.
Good morning. Thanks for being with us today. We're going to start by talking about the cost of living. Look, it is a persistent problem. It's something that everyone is feeling, and it's been made worse by the war in the Middle East. Yesterday, it became clear ministers have been pressing supermarkets to try and cut costs for shoppers. Today, the government announcing a raft of measures to try and, I guess, make it a bit easier to get by.
The government are calling it the Great British Summer Savings Scheme. Let's have a look at some of the details. They're planning to cut import tariffs on 100 food products, including chocolate, biscuits and dried fruit. Kids aged between 5 and 15 will be able to travel for free on buses in England throughout August. But it's also important to note that what isn't in there, there's no immediate help to lower energy bills. So our political correspondent, Lucy, is here. And Lucy, I guess we wouldn't have expected immediate help on energy bills because they haven't gone up yet.
No, and actually, Rachel Reeves has said a number of times previously in the past couple of months or so that there is going to be means-tested support, that it won't be universal. And what they always talk about is what the Conservatives did when Russia invaded Ukraine, just kind of came out with this universal support package. I think it's fair to say what they are still trying to do is say that they really are focused on the cost of living. They said it at the beginning of this year. Of course, Westminster has kind of been a bit derailed recently by what's going on in Number 10. Will Keir Starmer be Prime Minister at the end of the year? So they're trying to bring the focus back to the issues that everybody's facing, the issues that people kind of decide how they vote on, right? The local elections were really bad for Labour, and they know that that's because people feel pinched. So they're trying to announce some of these things here. Positive announcements that people will welcome. Free bus travel for kids in August. That is a really good thing. But what's lurking in the wings is, inflation was down yesterday, but all of the forecasts suggest that things are going to get worse, and the government is trying to wait and see so that it can announce something that's targeted. Let's just listen to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Lucy Rigby, and what she was saying on that earlier.
So the one thing that the announcement doesn't mention is help with energy costs. Is it fair to say that the days of, energy help, universal energy help that isn't means-tested are over because we can't afford it?
The Chancellor was clear that she wants to monitor the situation and then she's going to intervene in a targeted way if the circumstances
So not universal,
demand
then. That's means-tested is what
So
it's saying.
what's happened, as you know, the energy price cap has come down, so it's good. The energy bills came down, so between April and June, and that's really, really important because of some of the cost of living pressures that we've been talking about. But the Chancellor said that the way that the last government dealt with this, intervened in an untargeted way, which is hugely costly for the taxpayer. The Chancellor's been clear that she's not going to rush to action. She's not going to rush to any sort of universal action in that way. What she is doing is monitoring the situation internationally, monitoring the situation when it comes to our economy and the likely impact on energy bills.
There was a moment, wasn't there? Rachel Reeves was at a fuel station, at a petrol station, as they tend to be known. Petrol station, not fuel. Don't know where that came from. Talking about fuel duty, and she was heckled, and she hit back. Let's listen.
Snipes on here, Rachel. We're going to get arrested. Look at Rachel Reeves there with a smile on her face. You're ruining the country. Get Keir Starmer out.
I love our country. I love our country. I love our country. And one of the things about our country is good manners. Not very British. Right. Very good.
Great.
Put that on the telly.
It is funny But it's also serious. So my first reaction was, I would have cried. You know when you can feel your face heating up when someone is shouting at you like that? I think I would have wept. And good for Rachel Reeves for responding in the way that she did. But also, this is a window into what politicians face when they're out and about and they're not in Westminster. And I suppose there is a serious point here. This person was making a valid point. It's how a lot of people feel, that things aren't changing, but done in quite an aggressive way. And she fought back.
Mel Stride had that view as well, interestingly. He said the same thing, you know, her rival, right, you know, he'll say all sorts of things about Rachel Reeves' policies, but he said on this, he backs her, that, you know, we have to be more respectful in our politics and not abusive.
Yeah, it wasn't done in a very polite way, she's right. It wasn't very... he didn't really have very good manners, did he? But I think what's interesting is this type of thing cuts through to people. People want to see personality from their politicians. And when we get a little window into what they're like off camera, people love it.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one. And, of course, Nigel Farage, though, taking the other approach, saying he'd buy that person a pint, and we'll be talking to Reform shortly. For now, Lucy, thank you.
Thank you.
Defence Secretary John Healey has accused Russia of dangerous and unacceptable behaviour after a confrontation over the Black Sea between Russian pilots and the RAF.
So the Ministry of Defence has said that one Russian Su-27 aircraft flew as close as 6 metres to an unarmed British spy plane. Now, that is close enough to trigger the plane's emergency systems.
This all comes in the context of pressure on the government and their support for Ukraine after the announcement yesterday to allow diesel and jet fuel from Russian crude oil to enter the UK.
Keir Starmer yesterday had a call with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to offer reassurance.
And we got the statement following that call. Downing Street spokesperson saying the Prime Minister reaffirmed the UK's steadfast support for Ukraine and set out our ongoing commitment to do everything possible to debilitate and degrade Putin's war machine. He outlined how the UK was ramping up measures to crack down on Russia's economy, including through the new package of sanctions announced yesterday, and that as a result of the UK's actions to date, there will be less Russian oil on the market, with Russia weaker as a result.
So what is going on? We want to look in a bit more detail about that apparent easing of sanctions on Russia at PMQs. Keir Starmer flatly refused to acknowledge to MPs that's what's happening. Here is one person who has been trying to get to the bottom of it all in a neutral way. That is our very own Ed Conway.
Now, has Britain reversed some of its sanctions on Russia? It's a slightly complex story, but let me just kind of take you through some of it. And I guess, you know, the overarching kind of background to this is that we are really dependent in this country on imported jet fuel from overseas. This is just showing you, around the world, who are the biggest importers of jet fuel, just bar none. And you can see the UK is right at the top. We need a lot of jet fuel into this country. We've got lots of airports. We don't make much of the stuff domestically. So we've got to import it. And historically, you know, a lot of that jet fuel came from the Middle East. Historically, some of it came from Russia. Then, of course, you had the invasion of Ukraine. And when the invasion of Ukraine happened, sanctions were imposed on Russia, and all of a sudden, we weren't able to import jet fuel. This is just showing you levels of jet fuel imports. But look what happened at the same time with our jet fuel imports from India. So this is from India, jet fuel imports at the time, kind of 2022, when all those sanctions on Russian imports went into place. Jet fuel imports from India went up quite a bit. And here's the interesting thing. If you look at a lot of that jet fuel that we're importing from India, a lot of it has come originally from Russia. That's the critical thing. And we've been talking about this for quite some time. And actually, just last year, in October, the government said, look, we're ramping up sanctions. We're ramping up sanctions against Russia. And among the things they are going to tackle, or they said they were going to tackle at that point, they said that they were going to ban imports of oil products refined in third countries from Russian-origin crude oil. In other words, that's exactly the kind of thing that you see with some Indian crude imports and jet fuel imports. So they said back in October they were going to do that. Roll on to where we are today, and obviously there's a lot of focus back on this again. So I showed you the fact that we're really dependent on imports of jet fuel. Well, on top of that, we don't have much in the way of stocks of jet fuel. And then you have what's happening in Hormuz. They have big question marks about whether we're going to be able to get any jet fuel at all. And all of a sudden, the government is kind of worried. And they're worried because of that. They're worried because we're seeing cancellations of flights at many airports around the country, partly because of jet fuel being short. And so that's what brings us on to today. Now, you've got those new sanctions that they said were going to go into place. They said it was going to affect all of those products coming from other countries, which may have started as Russian oil. But now, all of a sudden, we had this announcement. There's kind of complex, the details of it. But basically, if we roll through this, what you see is it says that some of the Russia regulations do not apply to what's mentioned in this licence. And what's mentioned in this licence, I'm going to scroll down a bit so you can see, it is jet fuel and diesel. In other words, the sanctions don't apply to that stuff. And that's, you know, significant, because if you look at the picture of just how much money the Kremlin was making from various different bits of kind of crude oil revenues, it was going down up until recently. In fact, it was the lowest. In February, it was the lowest, their revenues from oil and gas, the lowest in 6 years. Well, now, that's oil prices, and you can see the higher oil prices are, the higher the revenues are. Oil prices have gone up, and also the Kremlin's revenues have gone up. In other words, partly as a result of higher oil prices, you can see those revenues are at the highest in 2 years. So Russia is doing better, and thanks to this change in the UK sanctions regulation, we are, I'm afraid, going to continue to be a part of that.
Ed Conway there, breaking down the numbers as ever. Now, Ofcom says it is still concerned that TikTok and YouTube are not safe enough for children and have not made changes to improve online safety. So
Meta, Snapchat and Roblox have all agreed to introduce stronger anti-grooming measures. It's after Ofcom asked them to do something about it following this call from the regulator. Sadia Chowdhury is here. So I guess they kind of welcome some of these small steps, but the overall thing is they're saying that there's an awful lot of companies just not doing enough still.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion around who needs to do more. Is it the regulators? Is it parents? Is it the government? Is it the tech companies? Ofcom is the body that regulates tech companies, and they're saying that not enough is being done. But not just that, they're saying that these tech companies are failing in protecting children, that they know that there are harms, that there is evidence to show that, and that they constantly insist that they have got safe practices in place. And so what they're looking at is, if you remember last year, the Online Safety Act came into place. And so what Ofcom has done is looked at the data before that law change and after. And they're using a children online safety sort of indicator that they use for this. And they say that the data shows that when you look at the number of children aged between 11 and 17 who say they've experienced harmful content online, that number hasn't really changed since before the Online Safety Act came in. It's similar when you look at the number of children who say that their personal feeds, this is the stuff that is pushed towards children, is the most likely route through which they are exposed to harmful content. Again, that number has barely changed. Slight improvement, but not that much. And then 9 in 10 children who are aged between 8 and 12 are using online services that have a minimum age requirement of 13. So that's quite a shocking number of children using that. With its new powers, Ofcom had asked TikTok and YouTube to set out how they'll make these feeds more safe for children by the end of April. They say that neither of those companies have gotten back to them about that. The regulator also says that neither of the firms have committed to any significant changes that have been set out by Ofcom in specific demands. You can guess what these companies are saying. They're basically saying that they've actually got all of these tools and safety policies in place. Meta says that investing in tools and policies, they're investing in tools and policies to ensure teens have safe, positive online experiences. A TikTok spokesperson said they're very disappointed that Ofcom has overlooked and failed to acknowledge their long-standing but also their newer safety features. And a YouTube spokesperson said that its platform provides industry-leading, age-appropriate and high-quality experiences for young viewers, and that they're working with child safety experts to deliver those protections. So I think that this discussion around who should do more, there is clearly, from the tech side, a real push to say we're already doing enough and it is not up to us.
Thanks very much, Sadia.
Now, Aston Villa have won their first European title in 44 years, ending their 30-year wait for a trophy.
Villa were crowned Europa League champions after a 3-0 win over the German club Freiburg, sparking wild celebrations.
Let's bring in Sky Sports News' Rob Jones, who joins us from Istanbul. Rob, no doubt the celebrations there from Villa fans, as wild as the pitches have been in Birmingham, on what was a resoundingly convincing victory.
Yeah, in front of Aston Villa's most famous supporter, Prince William. It was a performance fit for a king last night from Aston Villa, who were the pre-tournament favourites for the Europa League right from the start of the season under their experienced manager, Unai Emery, who had won this tournament 4 times before, got to 5 finals before last night, and justified why he is one of the elite managers in world football by leading Villa to, as you said, a dominant performance over the German team Freiburg, who were playing in their first major European final, only their second ever final of any sort. But Villa were excellent right the way through the game in Istanbul, scored 2 goals in the final 5 minutes of the first half, first through Youri Tielemans, and then the goal of the night from Emi Buendia, a brilliant curling effort to make it 2-0 before the England forward Morgan Rogers finished the job towards the start of the second half. And there were thousands upon thousands of Villa fans here in Istanbul over the course of the last few days. There were only 10,000 that were able, in theory, to get into the ground last night. I think there was more than that. There were certainly thousands more in Taksim Square, where the fan park was set up. And as you said, Aston Villa ending their long wait for a major trophy. There have been some tough times in the last decade or so. Villa relegated 10 years ago, some financial problems. They would have been quite close to some real issues financially had their new owners not come in 8 years ago. But last night, their crowning night, beating Freiburg. They'd already secured Champions League football through their league position for next season. That would have been secured had they won the Europa League, which they did as well. And now there will be a parade through the streets of the second city this afternoon, starting in the Jewellery Quarter, ending in Centenary Square. Villa will celebrate amongst their people back in Birmingham. And even at the start of next season, there is something to look forward to as well. Villa will go into the European Super Cup final. That could be an all-English affair if Arsenal can beat Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League final next week.
Lovely stuff. Thank you so much for that. Well, time to talk politics again now. In fact, we're going to quickly come off on the back of this topic. I'm joined, as you can see, by the former Conservative Chancellor, Reform UK member, Nadim Zahawi. You just told me, I didn't realise this, I should know. You're a Man U fan, but you want to congratulate Villa this morning.
I do, because I was the Member of Parliament for Stratford-on-Avon, and, of course, Aston Villa is our local team, and huge congratulations to Nassif Sawiris, and Emery's done a phenomenal job there. And, of course, the Prince of Wales clearly has another career absolutely ready for him. Brilliant football pundit and clearly a passionate Villa supporter.
More of a genuine Villa fan than David Cameron, your former colleague, who once got confused
I shall never forget
about
I shall never forget that. The West Ham, Aston Villa debacle.
Villa doing much better than West Ham. Didn't mean that in a bad way to West Ham fans. Let's talk politics and start with what we're expecting to hear from the Chancellor today. I mean, is it right this time round, unlike when you were in government with the Conservatives, if there needs to be extra help with energy bills, possibly with other areas as well, like food, that it should be means tested?
Look, I think that what Rachel Reeves has done is admirable, but, and here's the big but, right? When you look at the cost of fuel, and she got heckled yesterday by a feisty working class bloke who clearly is feeling the pain in that petrol station she was in. If you don't, in a world where you're borrowing and having to service debt, you know, our debt servicing by next year will be £120 billion a year. If you don't make the most of your own assets, North Sea, gas, oil, what do you say to the nation? That, oh, well, you know, I'm going to keep buying more from Qatar, Russia, dare I say, which is disgraceful in my view. But I'm going to also try and find a way to means test you. I think she's in a bad place on this stuff. This government's in a bad place on this stuff because they haven't actually realised the urgency of the situation in the United Kingdom economically. And by the way, across Europe, we got rid of Liz Truss when the 10-year bond got to 4.7%. Right? It was trading at 5.2% last week when I checked. We're in a bad economic place, and all this tinkering at the edges doesn't solve the bigger problem. And I just think this government, the reason they're failing so badly, and by the way, it doesn't matter if they change, managers, if we are back to the football analogy, if they get rid of Keir Starmer, they're going to tack further to the left, higher taxes. Even West Streeting today is talking about higher taxes. You know, young people who might today have a job and then look at getting on the housing ladder and then try and... You know, when I left university, I bought my first flat for £79,000 on Putney Hill, right? Did a bit of work on it, sold it, traded up. All that he's going to punish with higher capital gains tax today. That's West Streeting, one of their candidates in House. So they're in a bad place on taxation overall because there's no growth in the economy. They don't. When they came to power, they talked about growth. They haven't talked about growth for 2 years.
Unclear what the reform policy, therefore, would be on energy bills. But let's talk about the heckling, because you mentioned it, and the heckler might well, as you said, have had very legitimate concerns about the cost of living and may well be struggling. But he also called the Chancellor a piece of shit. Nigel Farage said he'd buy that person a pint. Is that the type of politics, the type of discourse we want?
He's demonstrating his pain, right? He may be emotional, but he's an ordinary bloke who is basically trying to tell his leaders, right, the second Lord of the Treasury, living in number 11 Downing Street, that he's feeling terrible.
I get that, but was her pushback legitimate? Was her pushback legitimate to say, let's have saying that we should have good manners, as was her point? Should we not have a better discourse where we can? People might be angry, people might be struggling, but Nigel Farage saying, I'm going to go and buy this person a pint, almost encourages to call politicians swear words. And, at the same time, we all talk about people's safety and security. Should we at least reflect on that and say, look, maybe he's got a legitimate point, but I don't endorse that kind of language?
I just think, ultimately, for a political leader, you've got to feel people's pain. Nigel Farage, my friend David Amos, all of our friends, Joe Cox, right, all gave their lives for public service by being murdered by evil people.
Don't we want to take the temperature down?
Nigel has to have an unbelievable security that the government doesn't pay for. He has to pay for it himself, right, because of the risk to his life. That doesn't mean we deflect, right? What I don't like about what this government does, and Rachel Reeves...
But who's deflecting?
She's deflecting because suddenly it's all about manners, not about dealing with the issue, right? Ultimately, the country's in pain, right? People have to try and get to work to earn a living, and the price of the petrol pumps, because of their policies, because Ed Miliband is so fixated on basically making us poorer because net zero has to be delivered above people's wages, people's livelihoods. It's mad. Of course people are going to be angry, but feel their anger. Don't start deflecting about language. We sit here, you and I have spent, 30 seconds, maybe a minute talking about the language. Why don't we talk about the real issue, which is that man's real pain?
Both are important.
I don't disagree with you, but I'm just saying, for political leaders to deflect, in my view, is unwise.
And the first answer or two was on the economic situation. Sure. You mentioned there Nigel Farage's security. Let's talk about the £5 million gift from Christopher Harborne. Was it for security, or was it a reward for campaigning for Brexit over 25 years?
So, a couple of things to say on that. First of all, the tax expert, ex-Labour activist Dan Needle yesterday annoyed a lot of people who are attacking Nigel by saying they've looked at it and there is no tax issue, there is no issue with a £5 million gift from Chris Harborne to Nigel Farage. It's a personal, private gift to Nigel.
He says that his expectation is it isn't taxable. That doesn't address whether it should or shouldn't have been declared.
I completely agree with you on the declaration. If you read the rules, the parliamentary rules, which I think why Nigel's on very safe grounds on this, it says that if you enter Parliament, and by the way, when he received the gift, he wasn't even in Parliament. If you enter Parliament within 12 months beforehand, if you feel that a financial contribution will affect the business of the House, then you should declare it. Now, if you haven't even considered going into Parliament and a good close friend gives you money, right, if the quantum is what bothers people, let's have a different discussion. But if a friend gives you money, right, and you haven't even considered entering Parliament, why would it affect the business of Parliament? So I think he's on very safe ground on this. Clearly, look, because Nigel is doing so well, because the party's doing so well, you saw the results in the local elections, the media are going to come after everything he does in his life, and that's to be expected. Well, and he's grown up enough to be able to deal with it, and he's dealt with it on many occasions now.
That's not the reason.
And by the way, let me just give you one final thing, one tiny thing. This whole story came out before the local elections. We live in a democracy. People get to make their mind up. They read the story about the 5 million gift,
so what?
And they still voted for reform.
That's fine. That doesn't change whether we need to investigate.
I don't disagree with you.
The reason people are focusing on this isn't just that he is a high-profile, successful politician. It's because it's £5 million. It's not normal. It's because it came from someone who is the biggest political donor to your party. And that's why people focus on it. And just to come to your point about whether or not it should be disclosed, the code does allow for a gift to go undeclared, even if it was in the 12 months before he became an MP.
If it doesn't affect the business of the House.
As long as, quote, it could not reasonably be thought by others to be related to membership of the House or the member's parliamentary or political activities.
Correct.
Political activities is quite broad. And if it was...
But if a person hadn't even yet considered going into Parliament, right, and he's been given a gift, surely it can't affect the business of the House. Do you see what I'm saying?
But political activities isn't the business of House. But the point on this I'm coming to is if it was a reward for campaigning for Brexit, it is political. If it was with a nod or a wink to going into continuing that campaigning in a different way, then that is a problem.
But it's not that. That's my whole point. Right? This is a private gift from someone that has been a friend of Nigel's for many, many years. What's clearly bothering you is the quantum, right? If this was...
I think it bothers a lot of people.
No, because... let's deal with that.
Wildly abnormal.
OK, so let's deal with that, right? Nigel requires literally a team, right, probably as big as the Prime Minister's to protect him because of the level of threats to his life, right? The government has said it will not. Previous government, Conservatives did the same thing. They will not protect him, right? Would we rather see Nigel dead or being able to pay for his security for the rest of his life? That is ultimately what we're talking about here, right? My choice would be I'd rather see him safe and be part of a very, very good team that will, I hope, fix the country when we win the general election.
Well, look, I unequivocally hope he stays safe and has security needs. Obviously, he's changed his tune and said it is a reward for campaigning for Brexit, which is something political. We need to move on because we're nearly out of time. Finally, wanted to ask you about Makerfield. Why is Robert Kenyon the right man for that?
Local, understands what his constituency is about, genuine. You know, when he chose to be an army reservist and fight for this country, Andy Burnham is fighting for his own political ambitions. I'll put that as mildly as I can. I like Andy. I've known Andy for years. We did some good work on the children in care and care leavers and the care leaver covenant. He did really good stuff. But he's in it for very different reasons. He's not in it for the people of Makerfield. Let's be honest, right? He's in it because he wants to displace Keir Starmer. I think Rob is exactly the right guy that should win, and we're going to fight and knock on every door to make sure he does.
Can you understand when people then question, in light of that framing of it, if you're the right type of candidate for reform going forward?
Of course they can, but we live in a democracy, and if I put my name forward, people can make a choice. I chose to join Nigel in reform. Why? Because Nigel wants to turn this country around. He's seen what Meloni's been able to do in Italy. He wants a team with him who've got the experience of running big departments. You know, I ran the Department of Education. Of course, I had a summer at the Treasury where we did some good work on nuclear. You know, investing in nuclear was really important for the economy. We live in a democracy, ultimately. I had a choice. You know, do I leave the country because I think this government is hopeless and doesn't believe in growth and is taxing higher and go and live? I've been very blessed in many ways. I've had a great business career, you know that. It's fight or flight, right? I didn't choose to fly away and go somewhere else and live in Monaco or Milan or Portugal or the UAE. I chose to stay behind because I think it's worth fighting for reform to get this government out and to get a decent government that does invest in this country, that does control the borders. You know, all the... You know, 200,000 people have come in illegally, right? Today, we get a warning from Europe saying that men from the Iraqi army, from the Afghan army, angry men are coming into the UK, right? What are we doing about it?
Nadim Zahawi, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. I mentioned one of the candidates there in the upcoming by-election. Here is the current list of candidates, Andy Burnham for Labour, Robert Kenyon for Reform, Michael Winstanley for the Conservatives, Alan Howland, Lord Hope for the official monster raving loony party, Rebecca Shepherd for Restore Britain. We expect further candidates for other parties to be confirmed soon. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the latest migration figures.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect.
Let's bring you some breaking news. Being a Sky News presenter. I began by asking...
Thank you so much.
...trusting us to tell her story. The battle for number 10. Sky News has been given exclusive access. Let me give you a sneak peek. It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Well, in around an hour's time, the latest migration figures will be released, and they're expected to show a further drop in net migration. Well, despite that, a new poll has found the vast majority of people believe migration in Britain is rising.
Well, joining us now is the Director of British Future, Sunder Katwala. Great to have you with us. Sunder's always a very, for viewers who don't know, a very thoughtful thinker on all of these issues. It's interesting, isn't it, the split between what is happening on migration and people's perception of it. Why do you think that is?
I think it can take a while to catch up because everyone knows there was record immigration in the last Parliament, and we find that only about a sixth of people have heard that that's changed. You can't really see the level of immigration in the streets. You can only hear about it through the news and politics. So in some ways, we're still having the political debate about the very high levels. I think there's also the very visible lack of control of boats crossing the channel, and that makes people think that that's most of immigration and that's going up. It happens to be that the boats have also started to fall. But I think a government that has reduced immigration, it inherited very, very high levels at 600,000, 900,000 as the peak. It's brought that right down to below 200,000, but people are still more focused on the boats than they are on the overall numbers of visas.
In terms of legal migration and the numbers falling so significantly, to what extent do you think that is the type of response to government actions that the government wants versus unwanted departures, young workers who decided they can find a better job elsewhere?
It's mostly a deliberate decision to reduce immigration. Actually, this government inherited changes from the last government that meant that it was going to fall to about 400,000. This government said it wanted immigration to be at a sustainable level, but it didn't say what a sustainable level was. And so whether or not they need it to go a lot below 200,000. The emigration story is not well understood, I think. Most of the people who leave the country are recent migrants to the country who came in those big flows. Some of the British people leaving are people who became British from Bangladesh, from Poland and from other countries. So a relatively smaller number of people might be, British-born citizens going out to the UAE or somewhere like that. So the big story on the falling net migration is a fall in immigration, not a rise in emigration. But emigration fluctuates because governments don't control it.
I'm interested in that, actually. I didn't realise that was the case. So that's quite interesting context to the kind of emigration story as you see it. When we talk about people's concern over migration, I always think that, we lump all migration into one bucket, and actually people feel very, very differently about people coming over to study or someone coming over to work or whatever it is, to illegal migration that people feel very strongly about when they look at the boats coming in, for example, washing up on the shores of the UK. Do you think that's partly explains, I guess, people's feeling that migration is still high?
I think that's one of the biggest factors. In this research, 55% of people say they would like the overall numbers to be down, but that splits by politics. So Reform voters very strongly feel that, Conservative voters think that. Centre-left voters are as likely to say, I'm OK with the numbers, even though they don't know they've fallen. But even the people who want to reduce immigration then don't say they want to reduce doctors or nurses or engineers or fruit pickers or care workers. So I think the control issue the public have is about asylum and refugees. People are split. Some people are very sympathetic to people on boats but want a control system. Some people have no sympathy at all to people on boats and wouldn't take any refugees anyway. So that's a very big partisan divide. But I think because the politics of asylum is so heated, we hear a lot about that, and we don't hear as much because the politicians don't argue about it, about the big fall in the number of care workers or the big fall in visas for work. Student immigration is a very big part of that, and that's been going down a bit as well. But it's still, about a third of the migrants are students, some of whom stay for a couple of years afterwards.
Sander, thanks so much for joining us. Really interesting.
Thank you.
Now, a few weeks ago, we told you about the potentially deadly impact of working with engineered stone. That's workers fitting things like quartz kitchen worktops. Later today, lawmakers in California will vote on whether to ban it, potentially becoming the first US state to outlaw its use.
So doctors are calling it an epidemic, and California has recorded over 560 cases of silicosis, which is an incurable lung condition linked to the quartz worktops. Let's get a taste of Katie's report.
Here in California, a deadly kitchen dust is destroying lives.
I miss him. I miss him so much.
It was the work that I chose without knowing it would cost me my health or even my life.
Doctors here are calling this a silicosis epidemic.
Using a toxic substance is unconscionable.
But the industry is reluctant to change. Why even bother working with a product that has been proven to have a risk?
You're trying to pigeon me into an answer. I'm not going to give you one. So, but good
why
try.
Not? Why not? Is this what's in store for the UK?
The problem is so much worse than people realize. People just aren't looking.
Look, we're interested to hear your views on this. Mornings at sky.uk. There have been a couple of people emailing in on this. Eleni saying if people refuse to work with these products, then there would be no demand and the product would then go. A really interesting one coming in from an anonymous builder, actually, a man who's been a builder for many decades now, saying that actually, he ended up working on one of these quartz worktops, and he was talking about how the process of fitting it, having to be cut using a saw, electrical U-turn, the dust was incredible. So it's just very, very interesting to hear about someone in the trade effectively saying they were quite shocked by the process of fitting and installing this product, cutting it, and that in their view, this is a story that is going to be absolutely huge because of the sheer number of these engineered worktops, quartz. I mean, they're sold, you can buy them anywhere. They're in kitchens all over the UK, and the impact is going to be.
Katie's reporting on this has been absolutely at the front, so do scan the QR code there to watch her full report if you haven't done so already. Let's have a look at the weather.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
It'll become increasingly warm and sunny for the bank holiday weekend, with temperatures climbing to about 20 degrees Celsius. Parts of the Midlands and South East could see values as high as 30. However, the northwest will be largely cloudy at times this morning. It's a rather dull start with extensive cloud and outbreaks of rains across Scotland, Northern England and Wales. It will be dry in the south with cloud breaking to give some brighter spells. That's your weather.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury. I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appear to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me, and I'll explain why you can't hear the call.
100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement.
It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
I'm observing what you're doing.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's very positive.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
Is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out.
What more do you need?
Now, over the last few weeks, Nigel Farage has faced calls to explain a £5 million gift he was given in 2024 from the Thai-based billionaire Christopher Harbour.
Well, Sky News tracked the billionaire to the island of Koh Samui, where our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch spoke to residents to try and get a sense of the man who has so much influence over British politics.
To find Britain's elusive and biggest political donor, we've come to the pristine shores of Southeast Asia. We're on the hunt for crypto billionaire Christopher Harbour.
But here in Koh Samui in Thailand, where he lives and has business interests, he goes by the name of Chakrit Sakunkrit.
He's bankrolling Reform UK. and gave a £5 million gift to Nigel Farage in 2024. That's now being investigated by the UK Parliament's watchdog. But here, Mr. Harborne is all about wellness.
One of the things that we try to help all of our guests that come along is change one thing on each visit.
That's him talking here, the 5-star Camellia Hotel he owns and sometimes stays in. Dr. Narantorn Sirasintorn took part in a talk with him in 2024.
I see many billionaires, but he is very nice. He is quite humble, and he is quite open.
Did he talk to you about himself, about living in Thailand and his business?
We don't go deep in that part, but what can I feel that he dedicate and he try to support Thai business, Thai opportunity. Like in Thailand, we are the wellness hub, and what he built in Kamalaya, I think, is one of the most. It's called global wellness destinations.
Christopher Harborne is a very low-profile individual. He may have lived for more than 2 decades here in Thailand, but he's pretty hard to find many traces of. But he's a billionaire with access to the luxuries of a billionaire, and we've just been told that through this gap here is the helipad that he sometimes uses, arriving on occasion by himself, sometimes with his family. He splits his time between here and Bangkok, and while he's given the largest ever single donation by a living person to a British political party, here he's known for far smaller, charitable donations. One of the small bits of information we have been able to pick up is that his luxury resort donates money to local school children if they've done well in their exams, and this is one of those schools, and we're about to meet one of the children that have received money from him. Alice is 9 years old. She was given 100,000 baht as a reward for her results, more than £2,200.
รู้สึกดีค่ะที่ได้รับทุนการศึกษาแล้วก็ดีใจมากๆเลยค่ะที่ได้ไปซื้อรถให้พวกพี่ค่ะ รถพี่พังแล้วต้องซื้อใหม่ให้ค่ะไม่มีรถมาส่งหนูไปโรงเรียน
We did, of course, ask for an interview with Christopher Harborne. We haven't heard back yet from his team on that, but what they did tell us is that he's not actually in Thailand right now. He's abroad, clearly keeping a very low profile. The impression you're left with after a few days here is that this is a man not just hyper-focused on politics, but laser-focused on extending life too, even if he's giving very little away about his own.
Cordy there for us trying to track down Christopher Harborne. Let's talk more about that gift that was given by Harborne to Nigel Farage, £5 million. Tax specialist Dan Needle joins us now from Tax Policy Associates. Very good morning to you, Dan. Thanks so much for joining us. You've done a deep dive, as you so often do into these things, into whether or not this gift was taxable, not going into the parliamentary rules about whether it should be declared or not. Your conclusion ultimately was that it wasn't taxable.
That's right. In the UK, we don't normally tax gifts as income. If you give someone a £10 Amazon voucher, they don't pay income tax on it. I think everyone knows that. What comes as a surprise to people is if you give your friend £5 million, they also don't normally pay tax on it, normally.
And what are the sort of swing factors you've been looking at that would change it from being a gift to, in fact, it being, you know, for work and it be income? I mean, what has to be done for it to qualify as not a gift, as it were?
So the one we're all really familiar with is a tip. If you go to a restaurant, have a meal, get a bill, you don't have to give the waiter a tip. You probably do. That is taxable for them. And the reason is that they just provided you a service and the tip is connected to that service. So if Mr. Farage had ever provided any services for Mr. Harborne or his companies, and right now we've no evidence that he did, but if he ever did, then it could well be taxable. So that's one way.
And there's two explanations we've had so far, and the fact they've changed is kind of interesting. One is to provide security services, albeit it's a decision it seems Nigel Farage has made after receiving the money. The other is as a reward for 25 plus years in the past of campaigning for Brexit. Do either of those qualify as a service?
So a reward sounds like it might, and it does change things a little, but we think still probably not, because campaigning for Brexit is not a service that was performed for Mr Harbour. It was a political position. And again, if there were no actual services provided by Mr Farage to Mr Harbour, we think that's nothing. Now, the security cost is interesting. If the payment was made to, if you like, subsidise Mr Farage's business, cover the security costs, and Mr Farage is going to take a tax deduction for the security costs, then maybe at least some of the 5 million could be taxable. But we don't know if that's the case.
And what's the process for whether or not this is something HMRC would look at? Do you expect them to have a look, or do you think that they only do it if there's a referral? What happens?
So most gifts between family members, HMRC has no interest in. But when you see large gifts between people who are not relatives, HMRC often does inquire. There was a famous case a few years ago where the late Bernie Ecclestone made £40 million of gifts to his lawyer. And HMRC were all over that. It ended up going to 2 tribunals, which ruled that no, of course, they weren't gifts. They were really hidden payments for the lawyer's services. So I wouldn't be surprised if HMRC opened an inquiry here and asked Mr Farage for more details, asked to see the documents. But even if the rationale is exactly as Mr Farage says, it's possible that they documented it in a way that does create tax. That sometimes happens. So yes, it would be unsurprising if HMRC take a look.
Can I just ask one final question, Dan, hypothetical, because this has been denied as the reason. But you mentioned the idea of looking backwards, campaigning for Brexit didn't qualify as a taxable event. What if there was, albeit it's been denied, in fact, a sort of, will you campaign going forward? Will you, in fact, be an MP? That's what I would like you to be going forward. Would that be taxable, or is that still outside of what would qualify as a service?
Let's say Mr Harbour gave you £5 million to agree to become a Sky News presenter. That 100% would be taxable because it's an inducement for taking up a role. The funniness here is, even if that was the agreement, which is denied, it wasn't an agreement to become an MP. It was an agreement to become a candidate, which is different. So we think it still wouldn't be taxable. Actually, so there is one other thing, which is if there was an actual promise for Mr Farage to do a certain thing in return for the 5 million, then again it could be taxable. But a mere expectation he's going to take positions Mr Harbour likes isn't taxable, because otherwise all political donations, or most of them, are made because people expect it's going to help someone with whom you agree politically. So we have to be careful. We clearly aren't going to tax all political donations. Are there ways that this one was different? Not clear to me it is.
Dan, can I ask you about Angela Rayner? Because this is another case that you've been looking into as well, and specifically this decision by HMRC to not impose a penalty. Was that a decision that surprised you?
So initially, all I had to go on were the facts in the report from the Prime Minister's ethics advisor, which said that Ms Rayner had been advised by 2 sets of advisors to get tax advice, and she hadn't taken it. And in those circumstances, I expected a penalty. So I was very surprised by the announcement. I then had a surprising discussion with Ms Rayner's lawyer. Now, he spoke to me with her permission. So whilst he's an eminent KC, and I don't think he'd lie to me for a second, he is her lawyer, so he's advocating for her position. And what he essentially told me was that the Prime Minister's ethics advisor got it wrong. And the 2 days that Sir Laurie Magnus had to go through the documents wasn't enough. But this lawyer had spent much longer going through it, and he'd discovered that, in fact, Ms Rayner had received clear advice, and it was perfectly fine for her to then rely on that and not get additional advice. So if what he says is true, and it's not more complicated than that, then I understand HMRC's position. But of course, I haven't seen the documents, and lawyers advocate for their clients. So I can't just say, oh yes, that completely clears it up. It is still in the box marked small mystery.
But it's interesting because I read your extensive op-ed on this, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, it's almost like your conclusion was, if that's the case and HMRC's decision is accurate, then she perhaps shouldn't have had to resign in the first place, and Sir Laurie Magnus, the Prime Minister's ethics advisor, might have got that wrong.
That's partly why I find it so difficult to just say, oh, yes, this one's over, we've got an answer, because the answer I was being given suggests that she was wronged and she was treated harshly and she did nothing wrong. But I can't just accept that on the basis of the word from her lawyer. I think it's fair for us to say, well, we have this letter from Sir Laurie Magnus, he looked at it carefully, that is evidence. If you want me to believe something else, you're going to have to provide some evidence, and we don't have that.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. The thing I think, Dan, if I can be honest with you, that I admire about you is your even-handedness across all parties. Like, it feels like you've looked at these issues without fear or favour in exactly the same way, no matter who the politician is. And, you've gotten a few kind of social media spats over it as well. I mean, it must be quite tough personally, in a way.
Not really. I mean, any lawyer is used to getting flack, and normally you're getting flack from the person on the other side who's trying to do your client in, or you're even getting flack from your own client, and that's difficult to deal with. But flack from random nutters on the internet, pretty easy.
It's even-handedness, but also meticulousness, and dare I add, glorious geekiness.
Yeah, glorious. Yeah, exactly. That's very
We're fans of geeks, just to be clear.
You're very kind.
Power of the geek.
Dan, great stuff. Thanks so much for joining us. Really, really interesting on both those topics. Could talk more broadly about tax policy with him another time.
Well, we'll have to try and get him on again.
40 seconds isn't enough.
No, it isn't.
To go around the houses of all of UK tax policy. That obviously does it for the main part of the hour. We'll be back again shortly with all of the day's top news, including what little tweaks to tax we might see from Chancellor Rachel Reeves announcing today a set of measures to try and help people with the cost of living and its potential to increase as the year goes on.
Yeah, exactly. They're obviously worried about it. We're going to be discussing it in just a few moments. Plus, of course, a reaction to that heckle, which you've probably seen by now.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We're in an area that's just been reclaimed.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
People are directly protesting.
The whole neighborhood is rallied around her.
It's been impenetrable to journalists over the last 2 years of war in Sudan.
I've been waiting for this for 2 years. It doesn't feel like a big homecoming.
It was never going to be pretty. War isn't pretty.
Good morning, it is 9 o'clock and welcome to Mornings with Ridge and Frost.
We're Sophie and Will. Very good morning from me as well. Lots ahead.
The government announces the Great British Summer Savings Scheme, but will it make a difference to the cost of living crisis?
Ofcom criticises YouTube and TikTok for not doing enough to keep children safe online.
The kitchen counter material that's caused over 500 cases of silicosis. We report from the epicentre in California.
Also today, the big week of football continues with a goal that's deserving of a royal seal of approval as Aston Villa win the Europa League in style in front of their most famous fan, Prince William. Very good morning to you, so it was me there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You weren't going to help me out.
Sorry.
Just staying silent. No, we both weren't focused enough. Apologies. Right, we're going to start by talking about the cost of living. It's a persistent problem, made worse, of course, by the war in the Middle East. Yesterday, it became clear that ministers have been pressing supermarkets to cut costs for shoppers. Today, the government's announcing a raft of measures to try and make it a bit easier for people to get by.
So they're calling it the Great British Summer Savings Scheme. We can look at the details of what they're announcing. Firstly, they want to cut import tariffs on 100 food products, including chocolate, biscuits and dried fruit, to try and bring the prices down. Kids aged between 5 and 15 will be able to travel for free on buses in England throughout August, so right in time for the summer holidays. But look, there's some stuff that isn't in there too. No immediate help to lower energy bills.
Let's talk about it all with Lucy, who's here with us again. And I guess that no immediate help is to be expected because the energy price cap means energy bills at least haven't gone up yet, even if they're expected to from July.
Yeah, and I think the government has been making this argument for some time. So when the war broke out in the Middle East, we saw, obviously, the cost of oil soar dramatically straight away. And what the government then did was step in with this intervention for customers who rely on heating oil, those people who were immediately feeling the impact of those hikes. And ever since then, the government has kind of been trying to play a long game. Over the summer, energy usage down, energy bills, as you say, because of the price cap, have come down by just over £100. They don't think that the worst effects of this will be felt until the winter. So they're trying to, I suppose, create this detailed plan. Crucially, though, not for everybody, like we saw under the Conservatives when Russia invaded Ukraine. And let's just hear what the government said about that earlier.
The Chancellor was clear that she wants to monitor the situation and then she's going to intervene in a targeted way if the circumstances
So not universal
demand
then. That's means tested is what
So
you're saying.
what's happened, as you know, the energy price cap has come down, so it's good. The energy bills came down, so between April and June, and that's really, really important because of some of the cost of living pressures that we've been talking about. But the Chancellor said that the way that the last government dealt with this, intervened in an untargeted way, which is hugely costly for the taxpayer. The Chancellor's been clear that she's not going to rush to action. She's not going to rush to any sort of universal action in that way. What she is doing is monitoring the situation internationally, monitoring the situation when it comes to our economy and the likely impact on energy bills.
I mean, they are trying to push the stuff that they are doing, aren't they, as well, the kind of tariffs, and I guess we're expected a few more measures as well when Rachel Reeves speaks later.
Yeah, and they announced yesterday that fuel duty will remain frozen from September. It was due to go up by a penny. They'll keep that frozen. I mean, it's worth noting again, it has been frozen for a number of years now, so that won't materially make much difference. And I think that helps explain the situation the government is in, really. They really want to try and say to people they are focused on the cost of living. They want people to feel better off. And I don't think that you can claim that the government doesn't want people to feel better off, but they're in a really difficult position because while inflation came down yesterday, great news, yes, but all of the forecasts suggest things are only going to get even more challenging, and they know they don't have this huge amount of money to give away to people.
Let's re-watch the clip of Rachel Reeves where she was talking about some of what she's going to announce today at a petrol station and was heckled.
I love our country. I love our country. I love our country, and one of the things about our country is good manners. Not very British. Right, very good.
Great.
Put that on the telly.
It gets better and better. I've seen it about 10 times this morning.
We've watched it quite a lot already this morning. There are a number of ways that you can look at it. I think my takeaway is how often do we see politicians on TV? Real frustration when you're watching them because you just don't feel like you're getting the true person. You're not really getting much authenticity. They're trying to stick to the line. And then you see something like this, and the reason why it gets, so many views online, for example, is because people like to see a politician kind of breaking out of them, the kind of the usual form that they take. So I think that's one thing to take away. And also, like personally, I think good for Rachel Reeves for fighting back. There's a way to make your point, and
no, I
think
it was very genuine and endearing. We've said that a lot. Do you know what? Funny to your point there, though, Lucy, to then slightly offset this, a comment more perhaps to the government's media advisors and particularly Rachel Reeves's one, which is she's probably the worst culprit of being very contained and sticking to the script. And she came across so well when she didn't. And so it's just like, guys, unleash her.
And
Trust
how
her.
many times?
Let Rachel be Rachel. It's a scene from...
Can you use like a placard?
What was that show called again? I can't remember. It's my favourite. West Wing, thank you. West Wing, one of my favourites.
That was in his ear, by the way.
How many times do we need
People didn't imagine that I have a voice in my head.
I think the
I'm psychic.
The choreography of TV there is so bizarre. I think sometimes people don't actually realise we have the gallery and the editor.
I can't hear anything, so I missed all of that, and I was sat thinking, I was just thinking, this is great, really. But how many times do we have to kind of say to advisors behind the scenes, this is the type of stuff that you need to be doing more of, because it also engages people. Unlike us, who follow politics all the time, it engages people who don't, and those are the people that you need to get on board. So please, more of it. Let Rachel be Rachel. There you go.
There we go. Maybe she should run for leadership.
Stop. Let's stop that.
Sorry, there's not going to be a leadership race.
Stop it.
Maybe there is.
What leadership race?
I'm moving on from that for a bit.
Yes.
Only for 5
until it comes
weeks.
back again.
Exactly.
Lucy, thank you.
Thank you.
Now, the Defence Secretary, John Healey, has accused Russia of dangerous and unacceptable behaviour after a confrontation over the Black Sea between Russian pilots and the RAF.
So the Ministry of Defence has said that one Russian Su-27 aircraft flew as close as 6 metres to an unarmed British spy plane. That is very, very close, needless to say, close enough to trigger its emergency systems.
Well, it all comes in the context of pressure on the government and their support for Ukraine after the announcement yesterday to allow diesel and jet fuel from Russian crude oil to enter the UK.
So Keir Starmer yesterday had a call with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to offer some reassurance.
We got this statement from the call, following the call from a Downing Street spokesperson. The Prime Minister reaffirmed the UK's steadfast support for Ukraine and set out our ongoing commitment to do everything possible to debilitate and degrade Putin's war machine. He outlined how the UK was ramping up measures to crack down on Russia's economy, including through the new package of sanctions announced yesterday, and that as a result of the UK's actions to date, there will be less Russian oil on the market, with Russia weaker as a result.
So it's important to look a bit closer at what actually has happened when it comes to Russian sanctions, because look, the government is saying that it's false to say that they've eased sanctions, that actually in the round they've made stuff more difficult for Russia. But look, what is going on with crude oil? One person who's been trying to get to the bottom of it all, here's our economics and data editor, Ed Conway.
Now, has Britain reversed some of its sanctions on Russia? It's a slightly complex story, but let me just kind of take you through some of it. And I guess, the overarching kind of background to this is that we are really dependent in this country on imported jet fuel from overseas. This is just showing you, around the world, who are the biggest importers of jet fuel, just bar none. And you can see the UK is right at the top. We need a lot of jet fuel into this country. We've got lots of airports. We don't make much of the stuff domestically. So we've got to import it. And historically, a lot of that jet fuel came from the Middle East. Historically, some of it came from Russia. Then, of course, you had the invasion of Ukraine. And when the invasion of Ukraine happened, sanctions were imposed on Russia, and all of a sudden, we weren't able to import jet fuel. This is just showing you levels of jet fuel imports. But look what happened at the same time with our jet fuel imports from India. So this is from India. Jet fuel imports at the time, kind of 2022, when all those sanctions on Russian imports went into place. jet fuel imports from India went up quite a bit. And here's the interesting thing. If you look at a lot of that jet fuel that we're importing from India, a lot of it has come originally from Russia. That's the critical thing. And we've been talking about this for quite some time. And actually, just last year, in October, the government said, look, we're ramping up sanctions. We're ramping up sanctions against Russia. And among the things they are going to tackle, or they said they were going to tackle at that point, they said that they were going to ban imports of oil products refined in third countries from Russian-origin crude oil. In other words, that's exactly the kind of thing that you see with some Indian crude imports and jet fuel imports. So they said back in October they were going to do that. Roll on to where we are today, and obviously there's a lot of focus back on this again. So I showed you the fact that we're really dependent on imports of jet fuel. Well, on top of that, we don't have much in the way of stocks of jet fuel. And then you have what's happening in Hormuz. They have big question marks about whether we're going to be able to get any jet fuel at all. And all of a sudden, the government is kind of worried. And they're worried because of that. They're worried because we're seeing cancellations of flights at many airports around the country, partly because of jet fuel being short. And so that's what brings us on to today. Now, you've got those new sanctions that they said were going to go into place. They said it was going to affect all of those products coming from other countries, which may have started as Russian oil. But now, all of a sudden, we had this announcement. There's kind of complex, the details of it. But basically, if we roll through this, what you see is it says that some of the Russia regulations do not apply to what's mentioned in this licence. And what's mentioned in this licence, I'm going to scroll down a bit so you can see, it is jet fuel and diesel. In other words, the sanctions don't apply to that stuff. And that's, you know, significant, because if you look at the picture of just how much money the Kremlin was making from various different bits of kind of crude oil revenues, it was going down up until recently. In fact, it was the lowest. In February, it was the lowest. Their revenues from oil and gas, the lowest in 6 years. Well, now, that's oil prices, and you can see the higher oil prices are, the higher the revenues are. Oil prices have gone up, and also the Kremlin's revenues have gone up. In other words, partly as a result of higher oil prices, you can see those revenues are at the highest in 2 years. So Russia is doing better, and thanks to this change in the UK sanctions regulation, we are, I'm afraid, going to continue to be a part of that.
Conway there for us. Now, a few weeks ago, we told you about the potentially deadly impact of working with engineered stone that workers have been fitting things like courts, kitchen, worktops. Well, later today, lawmakers in California will vote on whether to ban it, potentially becoming the first US state to outlaw its use.
Doctors are calling it an epidemic. California has recorded over 560 cases of silicosis, which is an incurable lung condition linked to these quartz workshops. Katie Barnfield reports from Los Angeles.
This room is now Jose's world, needing oxygen 24/7. He can't work, can't drive, can't even play with his grandchildren.
The disease is aggressive, it's unpredictable. Sometimes I don't want to see anyone. I don't want to speak to anyone. And it's all because of this.
He's one of hundreds of California workers who contracted silicosis, a deadly lung disease, from inhaling dust while cutting quartz worktops.
I have 4 children, 14 grandchildren. I've overheard conversations between them and my wife where they ask her what she's going to do when she's alone. I hold on to my faith. I ask God for more time to live.
You might have quartz worktops like these in your own kitchen. Recently, I reported on the beginning of a silicosis crisis in the UK.
I'm absolutely sure there are people who have silicosis who are unaware that they have it walking around the UK at the moment.
In California, it has already become an epidemic. The US state has seen more than 560 diagnoses and 31 deaths from silicosis in tradesmen working with engineered stone, with 98% of all cases being Latino workers. This is Anna's husband, Victor, a countertop worker, before the silicosis took hold. 5 years ago, she lost him to the disease.
I pray here, and when I am sad, I come and speak to him. It's been 5 years, but I wish that he was still here. I miss him so much. Before he passed away, his health was terrible. At night, I was afraid that he wouldn't wake up the next morning. He was always wearing his mask, But it doesn't mean the mask could protect him. He still got the disease.
And how do you feel about this product, quartz engineered stone, still being sold, still being used, you know, around the world?
I feel bad because this is going to happen to other families. And there are families with children, and they will be orphans without a father.
There has been a growing campaign in California for a ban on the use of engineered stone, the same move that Australia made 2 years ago. California's Occupational Health Board has been debating whether to start that process.
Hi, James. Nice to meet you. I'm Katie. How are you doing?
James Nevin's law firm, Brayton Purcell, is representing hundreds of silicosis patients.
Well, we started approximately 3 years ago with 20 cases. As of today, we're up to 750 clients. I mean, this is just off the charts epidemic. When it comes to high content crystalline silica artificial stone, wet methods, ventilation, mass do not work.
What would you say to the UK about what we could maybe expect coming down the line?
The silicosis that is diagnosed is the tip of the iceberg, because most of it is not getting diagnosed. The problem is so much worse than people realize. People just aren't looking.
The industry body that would meet with us is called the International Surface Fabricators Association. They represent both the manufacturers who make engineered stone and the fabricators who cut it.
I trust our industry and the ones that are doing it properly, and I trust that that the information that they're saying that it can be done safely, it is done safely. I do trust that.
But why even bother working with a product that has been proven to have a risk of silicosis when there are, like you say, zero silica alternatives available? Why even do that?
Yeah, you're trying to pigeon me into an answer. I'm not going to give you one. So, but good
why
try.
not?
Because
why
we're not?
not?
Because that's not my. Again, that is not what we're not representing the product. We're talking about licensing on behalf of the fabrication community, and you know we are product neutral.
Behind the debate over the safety of engineered stone are more and more people whose lives are being destroyed. They want the rest of the world to listen to them before it's too late. Katie Barnfield, Sky News, Los Angeles.
Look, we're interested to hear your views on this. Get in contact, emails at mornings@sky.uk. We've had loads of emails in, I have to say, already, both from people who've worked in the building trade and are like, yeah, this is, you know, appalling. It's been going on for ages, but it's also the kind of dust that you get and the lack of face masks is a problem across the industry. And also from people who have these worktops, who have quartz worktops, and say that they had no idea about it. They even have cases of people saying that they asked the manufacturer and were told that, oh, no, it's fine, there's no problem at all.
But we should be clear, there isn't a risk if you have it at home.
Yes, this is very, very important to say.
This is about the high-intensity manufacturing process for those workers, and we're going to talk more about it.
It's cutting the stone, not having it in your kitchen.
Yeah. Now, to a story we've been covering closely on Mornings. Families involved in a major review of maternity care are calling for a meeting with the new Health Secretary ahead of a report being published next month.
So nearly 2,500 families are included in the former midwife Donna Ockenden's review of maternity care at Nottingham University Hospital's NHS Trust that is now examining how hundreds of babies either died or were injured.
Today, affected families have written to James Murray, who has replaced Wes Streeting as Health Secretary. They've said, we believe it's vital that you hear directly from those affected before the review concludes, and we ask that you come to Nottingham to meet families, to listen to our experiences and understand the reality behind this report before the findings are shared with Parliament and the public.
I think if you speak to families, as we've done on this programme, you know, quite a lot, to be honest, in recent months, there is a frustration at the slow rate of progress and the fact that we've got a new Health Secretary who is going to be walking in with a whole new brief and a whole big to-do list is going to be a cause of some concern and worry, frankly, because of this.
Yeah, it's going to be very important to continue to watch, which we shall do, of course, here on Sky News, as we have done on that issue throughout. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking to the Online Safety Group Director at Ofcom, Oliver Griffiths, about new anti-grooming measures being introduced by some online platforms. We'll be right back.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
Perfect. Let's bring you some breaking news.
Being a Sky News presenter.
I began by asking,
Thank you so much.
trusting us to tell her story.
The battle for number 10.
Sky News has been given exclusive access.
Let me give you a sneak peek.
It was the day those present would never forget. Why did you decide to open up and tell your story?
I urge you not to look away. If Hamas hands the hostages over, they will end this conflict. The world has been watching.
Good to see you again. How are you?
Did she say how he was?
The conditions are awful.
The jets were ordered to come back. Historic day here today. How will you respond if India does launch airstrikes?
They'll be allowed to war.
I'm just going to put some body armor on. I'm Yalda Hakim.
Again, major tech companies, including Meta and Snapchat, have agreed to introduce stronger online safety measures to protect children. It's in response to demands from Ofcom, but it's not all good news because the regulator has also criticised TikTok and YouTube for failing to do the same.
We're joined now by Oliver Griffiths, Online Safety Group Director at Ofcom. Thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Morning.
Start with the positives, why don't we? So you're encouraged by some of the actions some platforms have taken in their engagement with you?
Yeah, that's right. So back in March, we set out a challenge for the services where children spend most of their time to up their game on child safety, and that was across 4 areas. And we're talking about the responses that we had today. And when you look at, for example, what Snap, Meta and Roblox have committed to, we think that's going to significantly improve children's experience online and reduce the risk of grooming in particular. And the NSPCC this morning are talking about, especially the move that Snap has made as being a really crucial change there.
Just because this is sort of Snapchat, which is young people are all over this, right? Like this is one of their biggest means of communication. Like this is like a foreign language to me. Maybe it is to you guys as well. But this is huge for young people. What are they actually doing?
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think all parents will recognise that as well. I mean, the amount of time that my kids spend on Snap is extraordinary, and it's essentially a messaging service, and so there's been real concerns there in terms of grooming, so that you have stranger adults that are in touch with children, and actually I think this is overdue from Snap, but it's a really important move in that what they're saying is that you'll no longer have adults who are a stranger able to contact children, and children will not be encouraged to expand their friendship groups to include strangers as well.
Can I just ask one other follow-up? Because you mentioned Roblox too, and again, maybe something that people are not familiar with, but Roblox gaming is all over the place for school-age kids, right? 9, 10, 11, like it's big thing. But there's a chat feature where you can just talk to random strangers, right? What's happening there? Yeah,
look, and this is really interesting what Roblox done, because you're right, they don't have a minimum age requirement. It's 13 on a lot of the other services. Roblox is much younger. And they made an announcement last month, I think, that they're looking to put in much more sophisticated age gating, and that they're looking to restrict exactly those chat functions that you were talking about. And one of the commitments they've made to us is looking to give the power for parents to reduce the chat function completely for under 16s.
Which platforms are you singling out that haven't responded as positively?
So the 2 in particular that we're talking about, and these are really focused on the recommender feeds. So the personalised feeds that are producing the material that children are looking at. And when we look at our research, this is really important. So about 35% of the time when children are in contact with bad content, it's because of the recommender feeds. And so we're calling out in particular TikTok and YouTube that we feel have failed to really acknowledge and address the scale of the problem that they've got with their feeds.
So this is interesting. The first point where there was some positive news was sort of focused on grooming and direct contact from people reaching out.
Correct.
The second point of disappointment on feeds and the algorithms, what's put up there. I would have thought Meta, on the second point, are the ones that could have been most exposed to not dealing with their feed. Where do they stand on that particular point?
Yeah, look, they've made some important moves as part of this process. They're looking to extend some protections that they've currently got on Instagram to Facebook and vice versa. And, we don't think that they are getting to the absolute heart of what needs to be done in terms of these recommender feeds. And, and this is, really the core of the kind of social media machine. And it's an area we're going to be spending a huge amount of time on over the coming months. And it's a kind of real matter of urgency for us so that we understand both like the algorithm that people talk about, but also making sure that their content moderation is right, so they are labelling material right, and that they understand the age of their people that are using their services. When those things are working properly, we think there will be safer outcomes, but at the moment we don't think people have got a grip on it.
When we speak to Ofcom, people previously have told us that they're keeping a close eye on what happens with Australia, right? With the kind of under-16 ban. And obviously, I guess part of that is seeing if companies do more without having to pull that particular lever. Where is Ofcom's sort of thoughts on it at the minute?
Look, it's such an important national conversation, isn't it? And it's it's a long way beyond politics. It's certainly something that I think we encounter the whole time in our lives as well. Look, we're the regulator, right? The watchdog. So we enforce the rules as they stand, and ultimately it'll be for the politicians to decide whether they're going to move to a ban. But I think with the research we're putting out today also underlines the kind of urgency of the issue, where you've got kids 8 to 14 spending more than 3.5 hours a day online. We're seeing that we're still coming into contact with harms too often, but on the other hand, more than 8 in 10 of them really think that they're safe and happy when they're using social media.
Can I have a quick final question on AI, which is seen as started to be talked about more recently, particularly as it comes to video and photos that AI have generated or altered, that a simple way to stop misinformation would be that all of those have to have some kind of bug in the top corner that says, AI influenced or generated. Is that something that you think would be sensible, and is that something that would have to be legislated for, or that if there was enough consensus behind it that Ofcom could just implement already?
Well, look, it's a massive issue, right? And earlier this year we launched an investigation against X because it was, with the undressing app, which was precisely this, that you had effectively deep fakes where, people being put in really compromising positions, and, that's an investigation that we've got ongoing. We are working really hard with the companies to make sure that they've got this gripped. We think there are also some gaps, and we're talking to the government in terms of whether there needs to be new legislation.
But even on that undressing, just quickly, people are still on X saying, put this woman in, I don't know, whatever it is, tennis kit or bikini. Like, that's still happening, right?
Yeah.
So I don't, there was a hoo-ha about it, and then no one's talked about it. But as far as I can tell, A, it's pretty much still happening, and B, it's certainly still happening if you pay for it, pay for grok.
Yeah, look, I think there have been important improvements. We've obviously got a live investigation on it at the moment, and we'll be making recommendations off the back of there and make sure that we then enforce against them.
That is a much more pertinent, short-term, important issue. I guess my question more long-term is, we're not talking about undressing at all, just talking about things that are not generated by a human.
Yeah.
Should that not be clearly identified? Is that not quite a healthy thing to get on ahead of before AI dominates our life?
Yeah, look, and I think in the end that will be for government to work out.
So it has to be legislated?
Yeah, look, we are absolutely kind of working with companies, and we have a kind of a moral power there. But in the end, we'll need to have the legal position as well. And certainly, AI, chatbots is something that's right at the heart of the government's consultation at the moment.
The companies could get ahead of it, I doubt.
They absolutely could.
They could.
Yeah.
And I think it would lead to a huge buy-in from consumers to use their brand of these things. But wishful thinking, perhaps. Oliver, thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
We've got a bit of breaking news to bring you now on Southampton. We know, of course, that they were found guilty of spying by this independent panel. They lost their appeal to be reinstated in the playoffs. The news is now that they are under investigation by the Football Association, the FA, in relation to the Spygate scandal. So the FA is now looking at whether charges should be brought following on from that decision by the English Football League Independent Commission to expel the Saints from the Championship playoffs and dock them 4 points for the next season.
So obviously the investigation so far was from the EFL,
Yeah.
It was the league itself who decided, the English Football League, to expel them from the final and dock points for next season. The Football Association's then the sort of body above that.
Yeah.
Unclear what the next level of punishment would be there.
Yeah, this is it's a clear escalation. Looking at whether charges should be brought, an FA spokesperson said, we will now investigate and won't comment further until we've assessed the evidence. So Southampton did admit to spying on a training session by their semi-final opponents Middlesbrough, as well as one held by Oxford and Ipswich as well. So, yeah, the FA are now investigating.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have the latest migration figures, which are expected to show a further drop. We'll have those for you any minute. Welcome back. We're now going to speak to the French economist who's making a bold case for higher taxes on the super wealthy. Gabriel Zuckman wants all households worth more than €100 million to pay an annual tax of at least 2% on their assets, a wealth tax, essentially, if you will, where he joins us now. Very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Give us the scale of growth in wealth inequality, first of all, in recent years and decades.
There's been an explosion of the wealth of the super rich. It's been one of the most important evolution of the world economy of the last decades, and it's been true also in the UK. So if you look, for instance, at the Sunday Times rich list, 30 years ago, the 200 wealthiest families in the UK, they owned in wealth the equivalent of 5% of the UK's GDP. Today, they own the equivalent of 25% of the UK's GDP. Okay, it means that those 200 families, if they spent all their wealth, they could buy the equivalent of a quarter of all the goods and services that are produced in a given year in the UK. And with the growth of their wealth, there's been an explosion of their power. So that's why it matters. And number two, what we've learned from recent research, there's been an international research effort over the last 4 or 5 years, that's the story I tell in the book, is that those super rich individuals, they pay much less tax relative to their income than the rest of the population. You know, above a certain level of wealth, if you have more than 100 million pounds, typically it's very easy to avoid the individual income tax. And so we are now in a situation where those extremely wealthy individuals see their wealth boom, and they pay much less tax than the average taxpayer.
And your argument is tax, therefore, should be based on wealth as opposed to just annual income.
So the main proposal in the book is to create a new principle, which I think everybody could agree on, is the principle that extreme wealth has to come with unavoidable duties towards society. So there should be a minimum tax that you have to pay if you're extremely rich. I think everybody agrees with that. And so then the question is, okay, how to make it effective? If the minimum tax is expressed as a fraction of income, it doesn't work, because the whole problem is that the very rich, they find ways to report no or very little income. So for instance, you know, a few years ago, you had revelations in the US on the taxes paid by US billionaires, and you saw people like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk reporting very little income, paying no or almost no income tax. In 1 year, Jeff Bezos says that he's so poor that he's claiming family benefits, and he receives family benefits. And there's nothing illegal in that. You know, it's just the way the income tax system works. If you find ways to report no income, then you pay no income tax. So that's why if you want to have a minimum tax that works, it has to be expressed not as a fraction of income, but as a fraction of wealth. Hence the proposal for an annual minimum tax for the super rich equal to 2% of their wealth. So just to make sure that everybody understands, it means that if you have more than 100 million pounds, we are talking about roughly 1,000 families in the UK, and you pay today less than 2% of your wealth in income tax and other personal taxes, then you would have to pay the difference to reach this minimum of 2%.
I guess the sort of key question on this is whether or not in time those taxes could be collected. And I think the key area here is capital gains tax. If someone's built a successful business, when they get to the point of selling that business, they should be taxed. Is a different way of assessing that, removing what exists in both the US and the UK, but it's a particular problem in the US, this step up in basis in capital gains. But clearly you want to tax it before then. But is that something that needs to be addressed as well?
Well, I think, you know, that would be a good idea. You know, we need both, removing this famous loophole, which is a step up in basis, and some kind of annual minimum tax. I think it's not enough just to fix capital gains taxation. It's important, and to be sure, I would support that, but it's not enough, because the fundamental problem is that when you're extremely rich, you can postpone the realization of capital gains. And so you can be in a situation where for many years or even many decades, you don't realize any capital gain, and hence you pay no or very little income tax. But the problem is that the rest of the population has to pay tax each and every year, for the very simple reason that we have revenue needs for our education, for healthcare, for public infrastructure, each and every year. So why should the super rich be allowed to postpone taxation when the rest of us, we have to pay, you know, each year? That doesn't really make a lot of sense.
We're out of time, sadly, Gabriel, but thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So the latest migration figures have just been released. Net migration to the UK, an estimated 171,000 in the year to December. I mean, that is a big fall. It's nearly halved in a year. We can now talk to Tom Cheshire, our correspondent, who has been across all this for us. I mean, it's a big drop.
Big drop, down nearly half, as you say, from 331,000 year before, but a big drop from nearly around 900,000 at its peak. So this is the lowest level it's been in nearly 5 years, since March 2021. So that's been driven by a few things, especially work visas. There have been far fewer of those being issued, and there have been a tightening of rules in 2024. 2025, so people weren't allowed to bring family members with them nearly to the same extent, whether that was care workers, whether that was students. The amount of money needed to get a skilled worker visa in terms of salary, in terms of proving you've got earnings, that went up. And then the health and care route for overseas care workers, that was closed. So we've seen this really, really big drop. The interesting thing, I'm going to keep going through this because it's a huge data set. We've also got Home Office figures coming, but Better Future, which sort of monitors public attitudes around migration, the public thinks very much the opposite. They put out a study saying only 16% of people in the UK think migration has dropped in the last year, and it has dropped significantly. Most people think it's gone up. Most people think, around half of people think it will continue to go up. So there's this real disconnect right now between what's happening with the statistics and what's happening around perception and what that means for politics too.
As you said, this huge data set's only just crossed, so I know you haven't had time to go through it fully yet. If the net number is falling, do we know roughly the extent to which that's because immigration is much lower, or is there also a rise or an ongoing number of people that are emigrating and leaving?
There's immigration actually is relatively stable compared to it's the big drop in immigration so far. Again, we'll delve into that, but it's people coming in that is seeing that reduction rather than a lot of people emigrating. But what the ONS is also saying, Office for National Statistics, which compiles these figures, and again, we'll go and dive into those a bit more, but they are seeing, people who came as part of that original, that really big increase, which was nearly sort of 5 years ago around that time, they're starting to leave a lot more. A lot of those would have been students. And the big drive, again, it's non-EU migration. That fell 47%. So the story before Brexit is we had quite high EU immigration, pretty low from the rest of the world. That changed after the Brexit rules were introduced. We saw a big increase. It was mainly non-EU migration. That is coming down. We're still the biggest companies from countries from non-EU, India, Pakistan, China. Most of the people who come from those countries are actually coming on student visas, especially sort of in the Chinese people who are coming. But again, they're all seeing big drops. So the sort of story that the government might want to tell, the figures are backing it up that it is coming down. The perceptions, again, it's probably, we're waiting for some Home Office statistics. There's a lot of statistics today. It's an exciting day if you like statistics. When it comes to things like small boats and asylum seekers, those are the ones that, for small boats, for instance, it's less than we've had last year, but it's still high. It hasn't come down in the same way. And I think that's a very vivid example of something that people latch onto.
You mentioned the study on perception, and we spoke to Sunday Cutwell on the programme a bit earlier, and the point that he was making is that the small boats impression for people, that is what a lot of people associate with migration, even though, of course, illegal migration is kind of a small part of the whole picture, which I guess kind of perhaps explains to some extent the slight disconnect, right?
Yeah, and it is, as you say, it is a tiny part of the picture. If you think it's 171,000 last year for net migration, that's not just including everyone who's immigrated. Small boats is in the tens of thousands compared to that. So it's really a small amount of it. It does add to the asylum backlog as well, because all those people who arrive are processed as asylum seekers. So those are the statistics they eventually show up in. But even the sort of the asylum statistics, again, it's a really small proportion compared to the government rules, the government policy, the government visas introduced. That is the bigger picture on migration.
But even though the numbers are a lot smaller, it's also not surprising that it continues to annoy people.
Yeah,
because it's illegal.
That's the thing that people feel strongly about, I think, understandably. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Really interesting to get that, delve into the data. Coming up, we've been talking an awful lot about these quartz kitchen worktops. We're going to talk next to a woman campaigning against the use of engineered stone after her brother-in-law died from the lung disease silicosis.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Hear that whistle and that crunch? We know that they're coming from the south of the city where there's a column of Russian armoury.
I'm Alex Crawford and I'm Sky's special correspondent based in Istanbul.
Look at that sheet of flames, and that has happened within minutes, and now it's coming from both sides and it's moving this way.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist. A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
There seems to be some sort of a shooting, what appears to be shots fired at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
It was a jam-packed interview. I'll tell you what he told me and I'll explain why you can't hear the call. 100 days in and back with the grassroots of this MAGA movement. It feels a little bit like he's a king, not a president.
He is a king.
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. These immigration rates?
Unbelievable we've come to this.
I'm observing what you're doing.
This post of Trump, it's a big shift. It's very positive.
Have you seen what Donald Trump's been up to? In the Rose Garden, in the East Wing.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist... My darling.
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
...is being a Sky News journalist. You said to people, I'm not coming back for more, but you have come back for more.
Well, let's kick off.
And make a statement. What can our Prime Minister say to you to not impose tariffs?
He's coming out!
What more do you need?
As we've been discussing this morning, lawmakers in California will be voting on whether or not to ban working with engineered stone. That's workers fitting things like courts, kitchen worktops, because of its potentially deadly impact.
Now, someone who knows all too well the reality of this is Carolyn Hudson, whose brother-in-law, I believe, died of silicosis and joins us now. Thank you so much for being with us. Talk to us about your brother-in-law, George Elliott.
Well, firstly, I'd like to reach out to Sky News and thank you for inviting me onto the programme to discuss what I believe is something that is the next industrial health crisis. It's not exclusive to the UK, and it will be worldwide if we don't step up to the mark and raise awareness. So I'm here on behalf of my sister Sandra, who lost her beloved husband to silicosis. Up until the point that he died, we had never even heard of this disease. And believe me, it is an excruciating disease and something that is preventable. George was a master craftsman and he had worked with natural stone primarily, but in the latter years it was the more engineered stone that we see in our kitchens today. He had worked as a stonemason probably from the age of 20, 22, right through to his death when he was 63. George worked at some very prestigious places, and I think one of the photographs there showed that he actually worked at the private residences of number 10 Downing Street. So that makes it all the more poignant.
It certainly does. I mean, my question was going to be, during this long and esteemed career he had, did he have warnings about this from his employers?
No. Basically, in March 2020, he started to suffer with breathlessness and chest pain. But because we were in the start of the pandemic at the time, it was very, very difficult to get fast-tracked for hospital appointments, etc., because we didn't know what we were dealing with the pandemic. So you could say that his prognosis and diagnosis was somewhat delayed. However, I would like to take this opportunity to say that the NHS were absolutely fabulous with his treatment plan.
In terms... I was just going to ask, in terms of the kind of history of this and the fact that we're talking about it now, was there a change in the process, are you aware of, that made this worse? Or do you think that this has caused many more deaths than we've all been aware about for decades?
Yes, absolutely. I think this is only the tip of the iceberg. Many years ago, I think in 2013, silicosis was a reportable incident on Riddle, but that was removed. So we've got no real understanding of what figures we're potentially faced with. I've joined a couple of silicosis support groups, and there's quite a few people on there that have all been diagnosed with silicosis. And basically, unless they're given the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity of a lung transplant, basically they've got a death sentence hanging around their necks.
Honestly, I just can't really believe this story. And the more we look into it, you know, the reporting that we've done, but also speaking to people like yourself who are stepping forward to say, this is happening, we need to do something about it. It's extraordinarily powerful, and we'd just like to thank you for coming on, talking about your brother-in-law, sharing his story, and hopefully pushing, you know, for some change to be made.
Yeah, I mean, there is a debate in Westminster Hall, which Liz Jarvis, my local MP, has raised. So word is getting out, but we need to all come together and make a joint venture.
OK, thank you very much indeed.
OK, thank you.
Just extraordinary, really. And I have to say, there's been an awful lot of you guys writing in and emailing in on this story as well. We can just share some of the viewer emails on this as well. So one saying, I'm retired now, but I've worked in the industry for over 10 years. I'm quite surprised with all the emphasis on just quartz work surfaces, because granite used in kitchens can also create a lot of dust when dry processed. The same goes for builders cutting stone on site with no masks. It's happening all over the country all the time.
Another viewer asked the question, is there not an option to take humans completely out of the process, use robotics to do it all? Or the cutting bit, which is the bit that causes the silicosis?
And a third viewer, a health and safety specialist in construction, pointed to this being a problem with proper PPE not being used. You'll frequently see cutting taking place without any of this in place and exposing the general public to this contamination.
We'll continue to cover that story on Sky News, and if you haven't watched Katie Barnfield's full report on it, you can find it on the Sky News website and app. Now, on to a more positive story. It was a historic night for Aston Villa, winning their first European title in 44 years, ending a 30-year trophy drought.
A 3-0 win over the German club Freiburg in the Europa League final sparked some jubilant scenes across Birmingham and Istanbul, where lots of people travelled to watch the game.
Here's the first goal, which was a volley from Yuri Tielemans. It marked, of course, this trophy, at least the 5th time Unai Emery had won the competition.
If you thought that was goal was good, look at this one. Right on half-time, that curling effort from Emiliano Buendia, a goal that had the Prince of Wales off a seat in celebration. William was just 1 year old when Villa last lifted a European trophy.
There we go. Well, the third goal, this time from England forward Morgan Rogers, sealed victory. 23-year-old became the youngest player to score and assist in a Europa League final. Of course, Villa therefore 3-0 winners. Comfortable.
There we go. I love these pictures. They're so joyful. That's back in Birmingham for fans who couldn't make it out there, but they were absolutely not going to not celebrate those goals. Look at that. That was just for the opening goal as well, I should say.
And among those celebrating we already showed you was Prince William. He is, of course, their best-known supporter, spotted in the stands throughout the victory. Can we just go back to the fans celebrating picture, guys, the video? Because do you know what I love about this? It's jubilant. It's also often when we watch these videos, you see tons of drinks going up in the air. So they were quite clever and not spilling their drinks.
They've got a lot of match to watch still.
Jubilant, but also caring of their points.
And also, can you imagine...
That's my type of fan.
Imagine the bar queue. I don't want to have to go back to the bar.
But do you know what I mean? Usually it's just suddenly you can't see anything goes. But I guess maybe it was the first goal. They didn't want to get ahead of themselves.
Exactly. A long way to go after the third
Can we watch it again?
We
love it.
We're going to have to keep replaying it. It's so good.
Oh, yes. Happy days.
That's a lovely place to... you know, you'll forgive us because we have a lot of very serious, sombre news to get through.
I'm being told we have to see us again. I want to see it again, guys. 5 seconds left. Again, go to break with it. Go to break. No one wants to see us.